Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators. Point of no return.
Chapter 19 Burned to the ground. When Trunks and Vegeta had both been in space together traveling to Earth, they had sparred every single day, without fail. Naturally then, Trunks felt comfortable as he and his father finally entered the hyperbolic time chamber to get a year's worth of training before Frieza's arrival on Earth. After all, he had already been there, done that with his father. The only difference was that they weren't on a spaceship, and the gravity was slightly increased in the hyperbolic time chamber. Trunks knew exactly what to expect, and was eager to start their training to help his father ascend. In retrospect, he had no idea what he was getting into. Trunks thought he knew how intense his father could be, but this was beyond anything he'd seen from the prince in all the time they'd spent together. Vegeta had become a man possessed in his pursuit to also become a Super Saiyan. Before, the sparring had been mostly for Trunks' benefit, to teach him techniques and strategy beyond just using raw strength. In addition, Trunks and Vegeta had both been limited in space, since firing ki blasts would have destroyed the spaceship. Now, all bets were off. The training was composed of brutal, ruthless, violent battles between father and son. Any outsider looking in would have thought Trunks and Vegeta were sworn enemies trying to literally kill each other. Ki blasts were used, and used often. Any and all dirty fighting tactics were used, whenever possible. Cheap shots were on the table, immediately used whenever the other dropped their guard. Trunks put his sword to good use, and more than once, Vegeta's hands had been almost ripped apart, his palms shredded and dripping in blood from trying to block the weapon. More often than not, the grueling days would end only when Vegeta passed out from raw exhaustion. Trunks would carry him back to their chambers, and each time, he would tell himself that the next day couldn't possibly be more intense. Each time, he was wrong. There was almost a month left now. Vegeta was getting restless. He had gotten much stronger, but he still hadn't made his Super Saiyan transformation. Trunks kept insisting he was getting close, but the boy had been saying this for months. "Stop fucking lying to me, boy," Vegeta furiously yelled in Trunks' face one day when he'd had enough. The prince was down on one knee, panting for air from their latest fight. Trunks was bent over and offering him a hand, but Vegeta wasn't having it. "Not today." He angrily shoved the teenager's hand away from him. "But, father, you are close," Trunks insisted, out of breath too. "We still have time. No. This isn't working," Vegeta hissed in frustration, shakily getting back up to his feet. He gave Trunks his back while he stared at the white abyss of nothing. "I'm missing something. Maybe it's an emotional response that you need?" Trunks suggested as he wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. "I wasn't able to ascend until I found Gohan after he died. Maybe what you need to do is think about who you've lost?" Vegeta rolled his eyes in disgust. "Spare me, boy. I have lost no one that matters. What about your father? Died because he was too weak. Your mother? Even weaker. Father, you mean to tell me that you didn't care at all when either of them died?" Trunks pressed disbelievingly. "Of course I cared at the time, you idiot," Vegeta snapped as he turned back around to face his son. "I was a child. Children are emotional. We've already gone over this." "Well, maybe you can use the no," Vegeta sharply cut in, shaking his head. "It won't work." "How do you know?" "Because I don't care about them anymore," the prince spat out in a cold voice, before trudging off towards their chambers. Trunks stared after him, scowling as he thought to himself. Vegeta was close, he could feel it when they fought. But for some reason, his father just seemed unable to tap into his true power. If it wasn't a physical block, then was it a mental block? And if that was the case, how could he help Vegeta get through it? The answer came to Trunks immediately, but he hesitated. It could backfire and destroy the relationship he worked so hard to build with his father. He cringed a little at the thought. But, what if it worked? Nothing else was working. He took a shaky breath, before nodding to himself with determination. It was worth the risk. Vegeta was very slowly shuffling away, his hands on his hips as his breathing came out raggedly. He was exhausted and frustrated with himself for his lack of progress. Raising a shaking hand to rub at his eyes, he was contemplating taking a few days off to rest, when Trunks suddenly phased in right behind him. Before the prince could even finish blinking, his son quickly wrapped his arm around his throat from behind, roughly wrenching him backwards. Vegeta's eyes were wide with shock. Trunks had never forced them to continue when it was clear that he was done for the day. His shock melted into anger when he felt a painful blow to the back of his legs, forcing him to drop to his knees. Trunks tightened his grip around his throat as Vegeta struggled furiously to break his hold. Trunks easily exerted his superior and overwhelming strength, no longer holding back as he forced Vegeta to feel just how huge the power difference between them still was. "What's the matter? Can't fight back?" Trunks taunted, sounding an awful lot like his father. He tightened his grip even more, making Vegeta's face turn blood red. "I should have known you were too weak to train with me. I don't know why I brought you in here in the first place. Should have just brought Goku in here and trained him for 2 years. At least then I would have a challenge." Vegeta was shaking with fury, reaching back with one hand in a desperate effort to break Trunks' grip. Trunks grabbed his arm with his free hand and hooked it against his side with ease. Vegeta tried to take to the air, if only to gain some kind of leverage. Almost immediately, he felt Trunks' power skyrocket as the boy ascended to his Super Saiyan state. Trunks easily held him in place as Vegeta thrashed against him to break free. The prince's vision was starting to darken from the excruciating pressure on his throat. His thrashing and struggling became even more desperate. Trunks had never gone this far before, and he couldn't help but wonder, was his own son trying to kill him? Feel that power? That's what a real Super Saiyan feels like. And guess what? You're never going to have that power. So why don't you just say that you give up already, so you can get the hell out of here and Goku can finally come in? Look at you, you're a goddamned waste of my time. Vegeta's ki was snapping around them in response to his rage and desperation. The prince wasn't aware of his power, only focused on trying to get himself free. He was soaked in sweat, his eyes squeezed shut and his veins throbbing as he feverishly tried breaking free from Trunks' grip, to no avail. But Trunks was well aware of how quickly his father's ki was skyrocketing. His mouth was almost watering with anticipation, just a little more. You say that you don't care anymore about your parents dying? Want to know what I think? I think you're lying. I think you pretend you don't care because you know it was your fault that they died. You were too weak and too soft to save them. Vegeta's power exploded around him with so much force, it almost broke Trunks' hold altogether. Trunks recovered fast, but the prince didn't even notice. He was only aware of the fire breathing right underneath his skin, the breath of an animal inside that was begging to be unleashed. Vegeta was shaking badly as he grabbed onto Trunks' arm around his throat, certain he was about to die. He was desperately fighting to bring his power under control while Trunks screamed for him to do the exact opposite. Let it go, father. Trunks shouted right in his ear. Let it go. Vegeta screamed right as his powerful blue aura flickered gold for just a small fraction of a second and his dark eyes briefly sparked teal. Just as fast though, the power slipped out of Vegeta's grasp before he even noticed it was there. It was too much, way too much, and he couldn't breathe. His power dropped, and he blacked out. Trunks sat down as he grabbed his father and pulled him backwards so he was leaning back against him. Vegeta was still trembling, but Trunks couldn't keep the huge grin off his face if he tried, having to resist the urge to shout in triumph. All their hard work was going to pay off. Vegeta hadn't transformed, no, but he'd come damn close. He let Vegeta's erratic breathing settle down, before he gently shook him by his armor. Father. Trunks shook his armor again, making Vegeta wince as he started coming around. You almost did it. What? Vegeta rasped, feeling lightheaded as he slowly opened his eyes. You almost became a Super Saiyan. Trunks yelled in bright excitement. Son of a bitch, his father whispered. Trunks couldn't quite tell if Vegeta was marveling over coming so close, or cursing him for what he'd done and said. He helped his father slowly stand up, the excitement in his eyes giving way to uncertainty as he wondered how much damage he'd done. Father, you know I didn't mean what I said. Trunks regretfully started. I'm sorry, I just kid, shut up, Vegeta grumbled, putting his arm around Trunks' shoulders to remain standing as he leaned against him. His son instinctively steadied him. If you were smart, you would have done that sooner. Trunks smiled a little in relief. Yeah, I guess so. It would have spared us both a lot of fighting. You wish. Trunks helped Vegeta walk back in silence. The prince was practically out on his feet when they got back. When they got to his bed, Vegeta collapsed onto it, instantly falling into a deep, healing sleep. Trunks checked him to make sure he was fine, before leaving for his own quarters. He was feeling extremely confident. They didn't have much time left, but a month would be enough. He was sure of it. But the days came and went, and Vegeta never got that close to becoming a Super Saiyan again. Father and son tried a mix of different things. More fighting, more baiting by Trunks, more rest. They even tried more food. Nothing worked. They were stuck, and the days kept slipping away. There was only one day left now, and Vegeta was pissed off. Granted, he was usually pissed off, but today was much worse. He was brooding, and Trunks had been careful to avoid him almost all day. A difficult task, considering where they were. They weren't training at all that day, having decided long ago that their last day would be dedicated to rest. But it was time to eat, and getting food was Trunks' job. The teenager was in the large food pantry now, frowning as he examined the scraps of food left. There wasn't much left, and they had to cut their usual meal sizes down over the last few days to make things last. Honestly, Trunks was surprised their supply had lasted so long. There's a little bit of ham left, Trunks finally called out. That all right? I don't care, Vegeta angrily bit out. He was sitting at the small table, glaring at the doors leading out. Trunks sighed as he emerged with half a ham to split between them. Father, you've gotten much stronger. I know that the transformation didn't happen, but shut the fuck up, half-breed. They fell into silence. Trunks split the ham between them, sitting down across from his father. Vegeta ate quietly, but Trunks didn't have much of an appetite. He wasn't looking forward to spending even more time in this place, though he imagined the training wouldn't be as intense with Goku. At least, he surely hoped not. I don't understand why you insist on spending a year in here with that fool, Kakarot, Vegeta finally said once he finished his ham. The food in his stomach had taken the edge off his temper enough for him to engage in actual conversation. You and I can both do another year in here. Trunks looked up from his untouched ham, and raised an eyebrow. When I go back to my timeline, are you going to stay and protect the Earth against the androids? No. That's why I'm going to help Goku train too, Trunks knowingly said, smirking a little. Just covering my bases. Bases? Never mind. Perhaps I'll just kill Kakarot for my own entertainment, and then take over the planet myself. What do you think of that, boy? Vegeta questioned, reaching over and taking the ham off Trunks' plate. Good thing I know your fighting secrets, so I can give them to Goku. Good thing I didn't tell you all my secrets. You aren't really going to fight him, are you? There aren't many Saiyans left. Yes, but he is destined to become stronger than me, Vegeta answered with an indifferent shrug. He tossed the last piece of ham into his mouth. So? I'm stronger than you. That's different. You're my son. You have the blood of an elite. He is third-class garbage, just like his brother. I will kill Kakarot, and enjoy it too. Trunks sighed, running a hand through his loose lavender hair. Father, I need him to help against the androids. Vegeta chuckled over his son's distress. Don't worry, boy. I won't kill your precious savior, yet. I will wait until the androids are destroyed. By then, Kakarot should have achieved his full potential. Then my victory will be truly sweet. So you are going to stay on Earth then, when I leave? Are you deaf, or are you just trying to annoy me? I already told you no. With Freeza and his top men out of the way, I will be the strongest warrior in the universe. I will become emperor, and the universe will bow at my feet. Then when enough time has passed, I will return to Earth, kill Kakarot once and for all, and then bring Earth into my empire. Sounds like you got it all figured out. I do. I wish you'd stay though. Vegeta snorted. You just want me to stay and fuck your mother so you'll be born. Well, Trunks awkwardly said, blushing with discomfort over his father's bluntness. Yeah, it'd be nice to be born, but it's not all about me. It's about you too. Earth was your home in my timeline. And I know you don't want to hear it, but you did care about my mother dash enough, Vegeta snarled, getting up to his feet. His palms were on the table as he angrily leaned forward towards his son. Listen to me good, boy, because I won't tell you this again. I will have my destiny, and no female or half-breed son will stop me. But father, we're your destiny. My destiny is to rule, boy. Always has been. You and your mother were nothing but mistakes. Trunks nodded, easily keeping the hurt out of his eyes. It didn't matter anyways because Vegeta was already walking away, heading towards his personal quarters to get rest. Trunks sighed, looking up towards the clock. It wasn't the first time Vegeta had called him a mistake. It probably wasn't going to be the last. It didn't matter. They had bigger things to worry about. Finally, the next day, father and son both walked out of the hyperbolic time chamber, with Trunks in the lead. Goku and Mr. Popo were standing there, with Raditz hanging back a distance away by himself. Goku brightened when he caught sight of Trunks. Ever since hearing that he was Bulma's son from the future, his perspective on Trunks had changed quite a bit. His smile waned a little, however, when Vegeta came up right behind his son. The prince's arms were crossed over his now battered armor, and he was wearing an aloof, almost bored look on his face, like no one there was worth his time. I will make sure to restock the supplies for another year of training, Mr. Popo announced. Goku gave him a nod, and Mr. Popo left to take care of business. Vegeta and Goku then made eye contact, and not for the first time, Goku wondered if it was wise for him and Trunks to both step away for a day. With both of them training in the hyperbolic time chamber, Vegeta would become the strongest warrior on the planet. For all he knew, he'd walk out of the hyperbolic time chamber and his home planet would be burned to the ground. Not a comforting thought in the slightest, especially when he saw Vegeta's eyes darken at the sight of him. Man, it feels great to be out of there, Trunks brightly said, stretching a little, oblivious to the tense stare down between his father and Goku. He looked over, and Goku made eye contact with him. Do you mind if I have at least a few minutes before I go back in there? It has been a year, you know. Oh, sure. Take all the time you need, Trunks. We still have 2 days, after all, Goku pointed out, grinning. So how'd the training go? Trunks shrugged a little. It was dash shut up, boy, Vegeta roughly interrupted, making Trunks look back at him. You are not to discuss our training with that fool. Ever. Understand? Trunks nodded, and looked back towards the other Saiyans. How are things out here? Anything new? Nothing out of the ordinary, except humans panicking because they're now aware that aliens attacked their cities, Raditz said, shrugging with indifference. We'll repair all the damage later with the Dragon Balls, Goku added. Alright. Let me just get some fresh air for a bit, then we can go ahead and get started, Trunks said, looking back at his father as they had a silent, mental exchange. Vegeta nodded, and they both walked away from the Saiyan brothers. When they were as far as they could get, Vegeta stopped walking and looked at his son in annoyance. We've been training together for a year. What the hell do you have to tell me now, that you couldn't tell me before? Here, Trunks said, digging out the last Senzu bean from his pocket. He extended the bean to his father. You hang on to this for now. It was hard as hell not to use it when we were training and things got rough. I don't want to be tempted for another whole year to waste the only bean we have left. We might need it in a couple days when Freeza gets here. I won't need it dash father, Trunks sighed. Please, just hold on to it for me. Vegeta rolled his eyes. He reached out for the bean, but his son grasped his hand when he did, pulling him closer. The prince raised an eyebrow at the serious look on Trunks' face. What? Vegeta demanded. I'm trusting you here. I'm not going to eat the blasted thing, stupid boy. I know you won't, but that's not what I meant. It only took a moment before Vegeta realized what Trunks was asking. They stared at each other for a few tense seconds. Finally, the prince exhaled slowly, as though in defeat. He pulled his hand away, holding the bean now in his fist. He eyed his son over, before looking away and staring off at nothing. There will be no bloodshed on this planet while you are gone, Vegeta grumbled. At least, not by my hand, for now, anyways, he added under his breath. Father, I'm serious, so am I. Trunks took a deep breath, before nodding. The promise was good enough for now. Fine then. Remember, I'm trusting you. I'm not fucking deaf, you moron, Vegeta angrily hissed. Now get over there to train the third-class dog. The faster you do so, the faster you'll be done. Alright. See you in a day? HN. Vegeta turned around to give his son his back, looking over the edge of the lookout. Trunks sighed and walked away, going back over to Goku and Raditz. Vegeta easily tuned them out, thinking about how easy it would be to go back on his word. He could kill everyone on the planet before his son and Goku were done. It would be useful to have no humans to worry about when Freeza landed on the planet. He cocked his head to one side, instinctively contemplating the best approach to purge the planet. His eye was twitching when he felt Goku and Trunks go into the hyperbolic time chamber. Now no one could stop him from tearing the whole planet to pieces. He was seriously tempted the more and more he thought about it. Just a few kills, to make himself feel better over his failure to become a Super Saiyan. Maybe just a city or two, it had been so long. Raditz's voice suddenly cut through his murderous thoughts. Vegeta? The prince scowled, turning back to face his old subordinate. His glare was cold, and it made Raditz stop where he was and not come any closer. The large Saiyan swallowed heavily, recognizing the bloodthirsty look in the prince's eyes. What? Vegeta barked harshly. Just wondering if you wanted to get something to eat. Kakarot's woman cooks well, if you're interested, Raditz said, trying to keep his voice as neutral as possible and not give away the fact that he was fearing for his life. He had thought he was in the clear with Vegeta, but now he wasn't so sure. Vegeta studied Raditz, before looking away. He tucked the bean securely into his armor. He wasn't one for keeping his word, especially when what he really wanted was to feel some fresh blood on his hands. But for Trunks, he would make an exception. Only for him. Fine. Lead the way then, Vegeta ordered. Raditz exhaled in relief, and then took off into the air. Vegeta was right behind him, and was instantly annoyed at how slow Raditz was going. His own speed had increased dramatically because of his training, but he could do nothing here since he didn't know where they were going. Finally, they landed in front of Capsule Corp. Vegeta raised an eyebrow at Raditz as his comrade turned back to face him. Chi-Chi's been helping Bulma, since her parents are still out of town and she's still upset about Yamcha. When Raditz saw the look of confusion on Vegeta's face that read, he clarified, Kakarot's woman is here because the mother of your son is still upset about you killing her mate right in front of her. And you expect me to eat something those females have prepared? Vegeta scoffed. Anything they give me is likely poisoned. It should be fine. Gohan is here, and I doubt they would kill you in front of the boy. HN. Vegeta nodded his agreement. After all, he still had the last senzu bean to heal him if he started feeling any ill effects. And if that didn't work, he would simply kill them all. He would be justified in breaking his promise to Trunks under those circumstances. Raditz nodded back, and then went inside to get some food. Vegeta crossed his arms, staring at the domed building that was still half destroyed. To think that he had lived there in another time. His sensitive hearing suddenly picked up yelling inside the building. Instantly, he knew it was the female he was destined to have a son with. Vegeta's eyes narrowed when he heard his name being venomously used by the blue-haired woman. He wasn't used to having his name being so disrespected in his presence outside of Frieza's forces, much less by a female, and his fists instinctively clenched at his sides. His earlier bloodlust came back with a vengeance, but this time, he craved her blood, and her blood alone. It didn't matter that she was going to be Trunks' mother. In this timeline, Bulma hadn't birthed Trunks, so she was nothing to him except a woman who still clearly hadn't learned her place. It was something he could rectify today. After all, there was nothing else for him to do. He had just trained non-stop for an entire year, and Raditz and Gohan were too weak to train with. He had promised his son he wouldn't purge Earth. Frieza was still a couple of days away. He might as well get some entertainment, he finally decided, as a slow smirk spread over his face. Alright, Raditz said as he stepped outside. Chi-Chi's going to start making us lunch dash. He blinked when he saw that Vegeta wasn't there anymore. The Saiyan glanced around, seeing no signs of the prince. He tried sensing him, but when he couldn't, he just shrugged and turned back around to fetch his nephew for a small bout of training before lunch. Bulma was angry as she stalked into the laboratory where she'd been working non-stop on a variety of different projects. No, she was beyond angry. She was infuriated that Raditz had the nerve to just stroll into her home, interrupt a heart-to-heart conversation with Chi-Chi, and demand that they make food to feed Vegeta. They would be lucky if she didn't douse the bastard's food with her D-Nad so he'd kick the bucket for good, she angrily mused. She sat down on a stool at a lab table in front of Jinyu's scouter, scooping it up and flipping it open. Goku and Raditz had both tried patiently explaining to her that they needed Vegeta against Freeza, but she didn't care about Freeza. Not right now, anyways. She had heard about Freeza for over a year now from Raditz, and he was almost like an urban legend now in her mind. Right now, there was only one enemy, and in Dash, and he was right behind her. Bulma's entire body froze, her mind blanking as fear rippled down her spine. The scouter fell from her hands, landing with a clank on the lab table. Vegeta's gloved hand was right under her chin, lingering right over her throat. His fingers were barely touching, but the rough, ripped fabric of his glove grazed her skin in deadly warning. I'm curious, woman, Vegeta whispered, lowering his hand and gently wrapping it around her throat without applying any pressure. How eager are you to run your mouth now, without Trunks here to protect you? If you touch me, Trunks will kill you, Bulma calmly responded, sounding brave even though her hands were shaking. She had seen Vegeta's strength firsthand, and she knew he could kill her with ease and with no hesitation. Her eyes scanned over her lap for some kind of weapon, any kind of weapon, but the only thing in front of her was Jinyu's scouter. I could just disintegrate your remains and the boy would be none the wiser, Vegeta sneered, his grip suddenly tightening on her throat. There are cameras, she choked out. I'll destroy them before Trunks sees them. Raditz and Chi-Chi will know. I'll kill them both as soon as I leave this room. And if you scream, I will kill the woman slowly and brutally, right in front of her son. What do you think? Bulma released a shaky breath. Their tones were casual like they were discussing the weather, but there was nothing casual about Vegeta's grip continuously tightening. And there was definitely nothing casual about his dark and murderous chuckle at her silence. I can smell the fear on you, he playfully whispered in her ear. She jerked away from him in disgust, but it wasn't by much. He had her trapped, and there was nothing she could do about it as he continued, it's about time you learned to be afraid of me. Not calling me weak now, are you? You've proven your point, Vegeta, Bulma hatefully spat out, her voice hoarse. But if you even try to touch me, I'll make sure I rip one of your fucking eyes out before you kill me. You might have raped me in the other timeline, but you won't in this one, I promise you that. Vegeta raised an eyebrow behind her in curiosity. Is that what you think happened between us, female? That's the only reason why an asshole like you would ever get near me, Bulma shrieked as he suddenly lifted her up from her stool, and then shoved her hard against the wall. Vegeta was right in front of her, roughly pinning her arms back as she struggled against him. She tried to knee him in the crotch, but he easily avoided it, forcing her legs against the wall with his own. He couldn't help the cruel smirk that spread over his face when he sensed that her fear had become raw terror as she struggled to break free. The stupid woman really did think he was about to force himself on her, but he wasn't going to. After all, he knew that he hadn't forced her to do anything in Trunks' timeline. The boy had told him a long time ago that Bulma had fallen in love with him, after all. Not to mention, Vegeta was as sure as he needed air to breathe that Trunks would not hold him in such high regard if he had raped the woman in front of him. Still, having the brave woman practically shaking in terror due to the simple position he had her in, was absolutely delicious to him. He chuckled in amusement at her weak attempts to force him back, contemplating what route to take. He could take this further and make her think he was about to have his way with her, or, he could tell her the truth. Her reaction to both would be so enjoyable, but he figured Trunks would be none too pleased with the first option. So he went with the second. I hate to break it to you, wench, but you gave yourself to me willingly, Vegeta smugly informed her, his face only inches from hers. Bulma stopped struggling, breathing heavily as she furiously stared back at him. The prince cocked his head to one side, intrigued by the fire of emotion that was ignited in her blue eyes. The emotion was sheer hatred, but it was briefly mesmerizing. You're a liar, Bulma hissed. I would never let a monster like you touch me. Oh, but you did, little female. So either your morals aren't as strong as you would like to believe, or you were just eager to become my whore. Bulma was so angry and upset, that she was at a loss for words. She would never hate anyone in her life like she hated this man. Her heartbeat suddenly picked up in fear as the unpredictable Saiyan shifted their arms, so he was pinning both of her arms with one of his. He reached up to her with his free hand, and ran his index finger over her bottom lip. He only did it for a second before Bulma jerked her head away, making him chuckle. Why don't we skip the bullshit, woman? You can submit to me and get on your knees, right now, and put that pretty little mouth to good use. It's what you are destined to do anyways, he sneered. Vegeta barely had enough time to close his eyes before Bulma spat in his face. His dark eyes were lethal with hatred when he opened them again. How's that for putting my mouth to good use, you son of a bitch? I'll die in this timeline before I ever touch you. A myriad of different ways to kill her flashed through Vegeta's mind, and the need to spill her blood, smell her blood, and feel her blood, was so intense that he was almost shaking from his restraint. Vegeta growled dangerously, desperate to break this woman, physically and mentally, piece by piece. He had only meant to terrorize her a bit, force her to learn her place and fear him, but now he so badly wanted to kill her. No one spit in his face and lived. It was only Trunks' voice in his mind that stopped him. Barely. The next thing Bulma knew, she was roughly thrown to the floor. She quickly sat up and backed up in a panic, already scanning for something she could grab onto to wield as a weapon to defend herself. It took her a few moments to realize that Vegeta was still standing where he had been. He was wiping the spit off his face, glaring at her while he did. Finally, he lowered his arm and snarled, "Listen good, female, because I won't repeat myself. I told the boy that I wouldn't kill anyone on this planet while he was training. I will let all your disrespect until now slide, only for that reason. But if you so much as look at me the wrong way from now on, I don't care what I promised Trunks. I will rip you apart and feed you to the birds. Understand?" Bulma blinked at him in disbelief, as though she couldn't comprehend. He wasn't going to kill her? Where was the madman who demanded that she help him locate the Dragon Balls just 2 days ago? She stared at him in unease, before furiously screaming at him, "Well, don't play these sadistic games with me then if you don't want any disrespect, you asshole." Vegeta slowly cracked his neck. His fingers were twitching from his restraint, which was seconds away from snapping. "I strongly suggest, for your own well-being, that you watch your mouth. You've already used up all of your luck against me. I am in the mood to kill somebody, so don't tempt me, woman." Without another word, Vegeta turned around and stalked away, leaving Bulma on the floor, shaken, infuriated, and confused. First she thought she was going to get killed, then raped, then killed again, then raped again, but finally, nothing at all happened. The heiress tightly gripped her hands together to get them to stop shaking. Vegeta was terrifying, but it seemed like that was all he wanted to do, play cruel mind games with her. She sighed deeply in relief, and glanced over at the clock in her lab trunks, and Goku couldn't have been in the hyperbolic time chamber for more than 2 hours. She wasn't sure she was going to survive to ever see them again. Later that night, everyone was gratefully still alive. Vegeta was still at the compound, much to Bulma's chagrin and disgust, but she couldn't force the man to leave, so she simply avoided him out of self-preservation, hoping he wouldn't sneak up on her if he got bored again. But he was just as eager to avoid her as well, staying only because he was being entertained with Gohan and Raditz sparring. The prince was sitting outside in the grass behind the compound, where he had been for hours now, watching them intensely. His attention was solely on Gohan. The boy's unique fighting style was a rudimentary, slightly altered version of Trunks' perfected fighting style, further proving that the young boy eventually trained his son in the future. But the effect of Raditz's presence in this timeline was also evident in Gohan's form and technique. Vegeta could easily see flashes of the aggressive and ruthless style of fighting that categorized all soldiers of Frieza's army, clearly passed down from uncle to nephew. It was fascinating to see. Vegeta smirked when Gohan easily got the best of Raditz, surprising his uncle with a hard uppercut right to his chin. His smirk spread when Raditz promptly fell down, holding his aching chin. The kid was good, much stronger than he had been at the same age. Gohan jogged up to Raditz, and extended him a hand. "Sorry, Uncle Raditz. I hit harder than I wanted to," the little boy sheepishly said. "I'm fine," Raditz growled, batting Gohan's hand away. "Oh, okay." Raditz was getting back up to his feet, when Vegeta was suddenly there. The prince roughly shoved him back to the ground with a boot to his back. Raditz landed hard on his face in the grass. "Stay down, weakling," Vegeta spat out with pure disdain. "Can't even beat a child in a spar. If I hadn't promised my son there would be no bloodshed in his absence, I would kill you right now. You're a disgrace." Raditz turned around, slowly sitting up, his face red with shame and embarrassment. Vegeta slowly turned his intense glare to Gohan, who took a wary step back. He maintained eye contact with the prince, but it was with much effort. The man was even more frightening than he remembered. "You and I will spar now, boy," Vegeta announced. Gohan blinked rapidly a few times, before looking over at his uncle, who gave him a short nod. The little boy quickly took another step back when Vegeta took a step towards him. The prince could sense his fear, and he chuckled in amusement. Having people being afraid of him would never get old. "I'm not going to kill you. I just want to see what you've got." Gohan pushed his fear aside, telling himself that his dad hadn't been afraid of Vegeta, so he wouldn't be either. He took a deep breath, and was about to sink into his fighting stance, when something flashed across the sky that immediately got his attention. He blinked at the sight. "What is that?" he wondered aloud, making Vegeta and Raditz both follow his line of sight in curiosity. "Are those comets? Holy cow, there are a bunch of shit," Vegeta hissed, visibly paling at the sight in the sky. Those weren't comets. Those were space pods. Those were hundreds of space pods, barreling through Earth's atmosphere. It was an invasion, and it had Frieza's name written all over it. "What do we do?" Raditz asked anxiously, looking directly at Vegeta. The prince was grinding his teeth together, glancing up towards the direction of the lookout. Trunks and Goku were still hours away from being done. His eyes shifted back to the space pod streaking across the sky, sensing the ki of the warriors inside. He was stronger than all of them, he quickly realized. He could easily take them out, and then, he and Raditz both felt it at the same time. The most powerful ki signature either had ever felt. They both stared off towards the north at the same time with wide eyes, left breathless at the overwhelming power that seemed to have no limit. "What the hell is that?" Raditz roughly asked, feeling like there was sand in his throat. "Freeza," Vegeta whispered. "No one else could be so powerful. It must be him." "Impossible, he's stronger than Trunks," Vegeta silently finished, feeling cold sweat running down his lower back under his armor. His fists were clenched tight, but they were shaking. But how? How could he have gained so much strength? "Uncle Raditz?" Gohan asked worriedly, looking back and forth between the two Adultsians. They both looked like they were staring death right in the face. Then, the explosion started from the landings of all the space pods. All three of them were knocked off their feet, back down to the grass. "What the hell?" Bulma shrieked from inside the compound, thinking the Saiyans training together was the reason why her house had started shaking. Just when she had a cup of hot coffee, too. She furiously marched outside to yell at them to go fight somewhere else, when she saw what looked like raining, fiery comets barreling through the sky towards Earth. Another violent round of explosions rocked the ground, sending her to the grass too. "You lying, incompetent bitch." Vegeta screamed at her as he got back up to his feet. "You said Frieza was still days away and now he's here. That's impossible. I hacked the encryption code, you jackass." Bulma screamed back at him. "I didn't make any mistake. The scouter linked to Jinyu's is still days away from here." "He abandoned the scouter then," Vegeta muttered under his breath, shaking his head in dismay. "The bastard has worn the same damn scouter my whole life, and he abandoned it now, of all times." They all looked back as wave after wave of space pods kept flying through the sky. Hundreds had become thousands. The ground was still shaking, and they could all hear sirens and see smoke rising everywhere in the distance. The sun had set, and darkness was washing over the sky, signaling death's arrival in more ways than one. "Vegeta, what are we going to do?" Raditz yelled at him, getting the prince's attention. Vegeta's mind was racing, but he was out of options. This was it. The moment they had all been preparing for. It had all come down to tonight, but they were being blindsided. Trunks was supposed to face Freeza, that was the plan. But Trunks wasn't there, and Vegeta still didn't measure up. The planet would be burned to the ground soon with the forces Freeza had brought with him. There was only one thing to do. Fight back. I still have one senzu bean left, so we have a chance. But, there are thousands of them, and what about Freeza Dash? How long do you think it will take them to find us, Raditz? Vegeta demanded. His comrade fell silent, knowing the truth. Even if they did nothing, with numbers like that, they would be found soon. They were strong enough to fight back, but it wouldn't be long before Freeza came lurking. Might as well take the fight to them. What do we do then? Raditz asked again, finally standing again as Gohan clung to his leg. "We'll attack head-on," Vegeta growled, watching the space pods continue to fall as he clenched his hands into tight fists. "They're still coming. You, boy, you attack before they even land and take out as many space pods as you can. Raditz, you kill the ones that have already landed. I will handle Freeza alone. All three of us will work together. No, you can't take Gohan with you," Bulma yelled out, gripping onto the edge of the doorframe leading into her kitchen to remain standing as the ground continued to shake. "If you two want to go on a damn suicide mission, then by all means, go get yourselves killed, but you're not taking Gohan Dash." Her words were cut off with a yelp as Vegeta suddenly came in and roughly grabbed her by the back of the neck. He threw her back into the compound, sending her flying in and crashing to the floor. "Shut the fuck up and stay here," Vegeta screamed at her. "You have the radar for the Dragon Balls and it's voice activated for you, so you need to stay alive. And if by chance we fail and you get caught, don't tell Freeza about the Dragon Balls." "What Dash?" Bulma started, blinking in shock, but Vegeta was already back with Raditz and Gohan, barking orders and making sure they were clear on their roles. Gohan whimpered a little, terrified of the thought of going up against thousands of hardened space warriors, and he didn't miss the apprehension that tightened on his uncle's features when Freeza was mentioned. He, too, could sense the tyrant's power. He thought he knew how strong an adversary he would be, but he had been so wrong. The tyrant was far away from them, but he could still feel the force of his dark power bearing down on him. When Vegeta and Raditz both turned around to take off into the air, Gohan remained frozen where he was. It was a mistake that immediately earned him Vegeta's attention, and not in a good way. Before he knew it, the prince had already grabbed him by the front of his dark blue martial arts GI, hauling him up until they were eye level. "Now is not the time for fear, boy," Vegeta snarled in his face, giving him a rough shake. "You're strong enough and skilled enough, so you need to be a man now and fight, or we're all dead. You got it?" Gohan meekly nodded, before he was dropped on the ground. "Now let's go, and keep your power down, both of you," Vegeta ordered harshly. With that, the prince blasted into the dark night sky, with Raditz right behind him. Gohan hesitated only a second, before he quickly scrambled up to his feet, and took off after them, ignoring Bulma screaming for him to come back. Vegeta was right. He had to fight to help save his planet. They were the only three who could do it. This was what he had trained for with Raditz, Goku, and Piccolo. Still, he couldn't help but look down in horror when he saw the ongoing purge going on beneath him. Whereas the Ginyu Force had preferred amusing themselves and taking their time, only purging East City and most of West City, the forces Freeza had now were destroying everyone in sight, ruthlessly working through the whole planet. There were wild explosions as military forces desperately tried fighting back, only to be overpowered with ki blasts. They weren't as strong as the Ginyu Force, but they were still far too much for the humans to face. Vegeta looked back over his shoulder at Raditz and Gohan, and threw up two fingers in a silent order. He and Raditz immediately diverged in their flight trajectory, with Vegeta heading north towards Freeza, and Raditz heading south, where he could sense the greatest damage being done in the purge. Gohan froze in midair, blinking at their sudden change of directions as he looked back and forth between them. That was all the hesitation that was needed for one of the warriors down below to notice him alone in midair. Gohan had only just noticed the purple ki blast spiraling up towards him when Raditz suddenly phased in right in front of him. Raditz deflected the blast away with one swipe of his arm, raised his other hand up, and fired back a bright blue blast of his own. There was a huge explosion and a rise of smoke, and Raditz immediately took advantage of the distraction. He grabbed his nephew and took off flying again towards the south, hauling Gohan with him in midair. "Listen!" Raditz yelled, looking up at space pods that were still coming down. A little further, and his nephew would have a better angle. "You have to take the space pods down, Gohan. We can't let them get more numbers on us than they already have." Gohan didn't have time to respond before Raditz shoved him forward. The little boy was trembling, losing his resolve as he saw the space pods still barreling down through the sky. Raditz was immediately behind him, raising one hand up over his nephew's shoulder. Yellow light sparked up around his hand as he rapidly gathered up energy, and then he fired. His blast flew and hit a space pod dead on, and it exploded on contact. "Like that," Raditz growled. He roughly grabbed his nephew's small hand and forced it up, before screaming right in his ear, "Now fire." His nephew did, firing a lethal blast that was as powerful as the one Raditz fired, without even thinking about it. And then he fired again. And again. It was getting easier and easier. His uncle hovered only for a few seconds, before taking off again, going to take care of the warriors on the ground as he left Gohan alone. Gohan was shaking as he raised both hands up, before his features set in hard determination. This was his planet, and he was going to protect it. The boy's blue aura glowed around him, and his hand steadied as he proceeded to fire with an accuracy that far exceeded his age. Space pods exploded, crashing down to the earth in piles of burning metal, dismantled at the hands of a 6-year-old boy. No other space pod landed on Earth after that. Meanwhile, Vegeta was on the ground, running with speed and stealth as he made sure to keep his power down. He was unfazed by the screams of humans being dismantled, beaten, broken, and burned alive from ki blasts. He didn't mind the smell of blood and death in the air, or the smoke and fire that consumed the town he was running through. If anything, it made him feel right at home. Death and destruction was what he grew up with, and it put him in the right mindset for the battle he was about to fight. He knew that his power was floating on the brink of the legendary ascension. He only hoped he could finally tap into it. An alien warrior came into view, and the prince immediately ducked out of sight behind a car that was on fire. His heart was pounding in his chest. He could sense Freeza less than half a mile away, but he didn't want to give his presence away. Not yet. Sweat ran into his eyes, making Vegeta angrily brush it away, but his body was subconsciously reacting to the enormous power level he was sensing. There was no denying it now, it was higher than Trunks' power. Even if he could ascend, he wondered if it would even save him. Vegeta slowly looked around the car to get a close view on who was purging the planet. He scowled when he saw that the alien warrior in front of him wasn't wearing the armor of Frieza's forces, and he had no scouter. He was a blue, scaly lizard with 4 long, thin arms, with talons on the ends. He wasn't a species that Vegeta recognized. The warrior turned to fire another ki blast, when Vegeta swept in from behind, and violently wrenched his head off. The prince was already out of sight again before the body even fell to the ground, continuing to advance towards his enemy while silently but ruthlessly taking care of any other warrior aliens along his way. Finally, Vegeta saw a clearing. Buildings had been leveled, and all shreds of life were gone. Standing in the dead middle, with his back to the prince, was the source of the power they had all felt miles and miles away. The alien's sleek tail waved slowly, back and forth, as though patiently beckoning him. Vegeta ducked behind the corner of a building to remain out of sight, but he peeked back out with wide eyes as his blood ran cold at the sight of him. Even from this distance, he saw the truth. That wasn't Freeza. That was Cooler. But how? His mind raged. He hadn't been fully conscious at the time, but he had still been well aware that Cooler had tried using him as leverage against Trunks at the trials. It was one of his last coherent thoughts of that night. Trunks had killed Cooler in King Cold. The boy had confirmed it later on. Vegeta mentally cursed his son straight to hell. Trunks hadn't finished Cooler off after all, since the bastard was standing right in front of him. He should have known the boy was too soft to finish the fucking job. I know you're out there, Cooler's voice boomed as his metallic tail whizzed in amusement. Cooler looked to the side, and Vegeta ducked out of sight again, cursing under his breath. I can smell you, monkey. That stench is unmistakable. Without further warning, the building Vegeta was behind exploded, sending him flying backwards and crashing into a pile of rubble, dust and debris falling on top of him. The prince angrily shoved it all off him, getting back up to his feet. There you are, Cooler said with a smirk, now only about 10 feet in front of the prince. No wonder my brother was always so interested in you. You certainly are resilient, Vegeta. I could say the same about you. Last I heard, you were sliced to death, Vegeta sneered, his fists clenched so tight that his forearms hurt. If my family was so easily defeated, we wouldn't rule the entire universe, now would we? Oh? Is that why your father was killed like he was nothing? Well, at least he put up a fight, which isn't what I heard about your weak father. Vegeta grit his teeth together, before barking out, where's Freeza? Your concern is with me at the moment. Cooler's expression darkened with hatred as he raised up one sleek finger. One chance, Saiyan. Tell me where the boy is who killed my father. You're going to die anyways, but I will give you a quick death if you answer my question with the truth. Otherwise, I will let my brother finish you off. He might just turn you in personally to the Lion Army, and let them do with you as they please. Vegeta blinked a few times. The Lion Army? That's who you brought? Yes. Freeza informed me that you were going to purge my planet Liona of your own accord prior to your capture. Instead of waiting for their demise, I offered the Lions the chance to strike first against the cruel Prince Vegeta. Kill or be killed, as they say. I'm sure you of all people understand, Cooler chuckled. They are doing such a fine job of purging this planet, don't you think? Cooler. Vegeta growled, taking a step forward. Freeza is the one that ordered me to purge Liona and Rhythika, and now he's just using your attachment to your father against you, you fool. If you continue to help him, you'll die, he yelled. Cooler smiled sadistically. The prince thought he was sharing news with him, but he was no fool. He already knew that his brother had no intentions of letting him leave this planet alive. He was going to let Freeza kill the half-breed Saiyan boy, and right when it happened, he was going to swoop in and destroy his younger brother once and for all. They were both playing each other, and it would come down to who attacked first. And Cooler was going to make damn sure that was him. But first things were first. The Saiyan boy had to die. And as long as there was still air in the half-breed's lungs, Freeza and Cooler were going to work together. They were willing to burn the entire universe to ashes if necessary to ensure Trunks' death. It was the only thing that mattered. My business with my brother is none of your concern, Vegeta. All you need to do is tell me where the boy is, Cooler sneered, raising one finger again. One last chance. Where is he? Vegeta glared, his heartbeat ringing in his ears. Seconds passed filled with silence between them, with the sounds of explosions and screaming in the distance. Finally, Vegeta's eyes shifted over, and he lied, he's right behind you. It all happened in under a second. Cooler immediately spun around, already braced for battle against the lavender-haired Saiyan hybrid. Lightning fast, the prince raised his hand to fire the first shot in the fight against Cooler, who had foolishly turned his back on him. Vegeta had barely lifted his hand, though, when his body was violently jolted. The familiar taste of his own blood rushed up his throat, filling his mouth until the blood was trickling down his chin. The prince was shaking as he slowly looked down. There was a clenched white fist that he immediately recognized, drenched in crimson, sticking out of the padding of his armor that covered his stomach. My poor, precious monkey, you should have known that I would also learn how to hide my power, Freeza chuckled right behind Vegeta's ear. Such a shame we had to meet again like this. But just know that you were always like a son to me, Vegeta. I cared so much about you. But I have a new, half-breed pet I must tame. It's been fun, sweet prince. Freeza then withdrew his bloodied arm. Vegeta's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the dirt. Ch 19 of 23 next. Chapter 20, The Breaking Point, Kaa, Mia. Red fire surrounded Goku, who was glowing like a star about to explode. He was down on one knee, his hand shaking as his eyes locked on Trunks, who was in midair above him. The young Saiyan hybrid had his hands back, gathering up energy of his own in a showdown to push Goku to ascend. Raw, electric blue ki snapped up between Trunks' hands, and his golden aura flared up as he powered up. Something's wrong, Trunks suddenly thought, blinking rapidly at the feeling that had suddenly settled in his stomach. He grit his teeth together, pushing the feeling aside as he gathered up more energy. Hey Mia. Trunks had to resist the urge to shake his head in admiration. They had only been training for 6 months, but Goku was already on the cusp of the legendary ascension. He was a natural, and his progression was moving much faster than Vegeta's had. Trunks was sure that he could ascend, right here, right now. This wasn't the time for distractions, but then the feeling in his stomach intensified. He had only felt this once before in his life, when he woke up after Gohan knocked him out in his timeline. A feeling of absolute hopelessness and dread. His eyes glazed over briefly as he wondered what was wrong. Surely, Vegeta hadn't gone back on his word, had he? Hey. Goku fired a powerful blast of blue ki, immediately getting Trunks' attention again. Trunks was about to fire his own counterattack to push Goku's limits even further, when the feeling of dread in his stomach worsened, spreading up his spine. No. Something was definitely wrong. His eye twitched as he watched the beam of energy spiral up right towards him, his own ki burning in between the palms of his hands, waiting to be unleashed. Everything was rumbling around them in response to Goku's extraordinary power, a thundering that was waiting for Trunks to fire back so it would be finally complete. But the very last second, Trunks dodged the attack, extinguishing his ki at the same time. He watched the powerful energy spiral away into the white abyss, feeling the waves of raw heat rush past him. Trunks? Goku gasped as he panted for air. It was only then that they both heard the banging, confirming Trunks' sinking intuition. Goku could only blink as Trunks' golden aura flared up around him, before he flew back towards the small living quarters without a word. Goku immediately shot off after him, having to fly as fast as possible to not be left behind. Trunks descended, running in a dead sprint while he drew out his sword. He lowered his shoulder and charged through the door leading out of the hyperbolic time chamber with so much force, he almost killed Mr. Popo who had been banging on that same door. Trunks, what's wrong? Goku asked, running after Trunks a couple of seconds later. He was completely out of breath, still winded from their spar. But Trunks had already run to the edge of the lookout, peering over as his heart pounded hard in his chest. His stomach dropped as his grip on his sword handle tightened. He could practically smell the death all the way from where he was. A purge. Had to be. His first, furious thought was that Vegeta had done this. But when he stretched out his senses to feel for his father to put an end to the bloodshed, his fury gave way to confusion and then concern. He couldn't feel Vegeta's key signature at all. What the hell is going on here? Trunks asked out loud, his eyes widening in shock as he felt thousands of high-key signatures that he didn't recognize. I was trying to get your attention, Trunks, Mr. Popo said from behind him as Goku held him up. The Earth is being invaded. They need your help. What? Goku cried out, blinking in astonishment. But, Freeza wasn't supposed to dash. It's not Freeza, it's probably the rest of his army that he sent to purge the planet. Trunks shouted. There's no time, Goku. You start working on taking those guys out. I have to find my father. Trunks, wait. Goku yelled out for him, but Trunks had already taken off. Trunks was flying at supersonic speed through the night sky towards West City, looking down at the destruction he was flying over. There was so much death beneath him, it made him feel sick. Corpses. So many corpses, human and alien alike. Buildings were on fire, and there were still faint explosions going off in the distance. Trunks extended his senses again, and easily pinpointed Raditz and Gohan. They were fighting, he could feel it. He was close enough to Capsule Corp to reach out for Bulma, something he was well versed in from always trying to protect her in his timeline. It took a few seconds to pinpoint her weak key, which was rapidly on the move, but she seemed fine from what he could feel. It was only his father who he couldn't sense. Hoping the prince was hiding his key, Trunks tried reaching out for him telepathically, but he was getting nothing back. but how could he be beaten? None of these guys are stronger than him, Trunks thought in bewilderment. Finally, he changed tactics, and reached out to Raditz. Raditz. It took a few seconds, before he heard back, Trunks? You're already out? Where's my father? Trunks demanded as he looked down at West City. His home, destroyed. The exact thing he'd traveled back to prevent. His blue eyes darkened when he saw a group of aliens firing ki blasts at will, setting humans on fire. Screams of agony rose up to him, and Trunks immediately responded by firing a blast of his own as he flew over them. He killed the group instantly, as concrete and metal exploded from his attack. Trunks kept flying, maintaining his speed the entire time. He was heading north. There was a huge power level that we sensed up there. It must have been Freeza, but there was a stream of furious metal cursing from Raditz as he dodged a wild attack from an alien he was fighting on the street. Raditz was quickly backed up on his heels, before he shot up into the air as a car was hurled right where he had been a second ago. The car crashed into a store with so much force, it leveled it on impact in a massive explosion. Raditz. Does he still have the Senza bean or have you guys used it yet? He should still have it, Raditz sent back, lifting his arms up over his head as he gathered up desperate red ki in his hands. Raditz grit his teeth, trying to keep his eyes on his enemy, while keeping tabs on Gohan who was engaged in a heated battle of his own, while trying to keep up with Trunks mentally. He was about to fire when another warrior alien shot a powerful blast right at him from behind. The Saiyan sensed it and did a backflip out of the way, and while upside down, he fired his attack on that alien instead, sending the blue lizard shrieking and flying back into the distance. Sorry kid, I'm kinda busy right now. Raditz finally sent back. You have to go find Vegeta. I don't know where Freeza is, the power dropped and I can't sense him anymore, shit. Raditz mentally cursed, caught by surprise by a hard elbow to the back of his neck that sent him right into a ki attack from another warrior. He barely brought up both of his arms to defend himself as the numbers game started to catch up to him. Just hang on, Goku's coming to help. Trunks sent back, heading north as he desperately searched for his father on the ground, shooting powerful blasts at every alien that he saw along the way. Trunks very quickly racked up a high body count, leaving no alien alive as he killed without mercy and without hesitation. Not even thinking about his actions, Trunks' brow furrowed as he thought about the high power level that Raditz had felt. Freeza, there, already? And if that was the case, then where was he now? He couldn't sense any huge power level. Had Vegeta defeated him? It wasn't too far-fetched, Trunks optimistically concluded, especially if his father made his Super Saiyan transformation. Maybe Vegeta had defeated Freeza, and then passed out from exhaustion. His thoughts, optimism, and flight all came to an abrupt stop in the night sky. Trunks' mouth ran dry as he looked down at a massive, barren, circular clearing almost a mile wide in radius, right in the middle of North City. It looked almost like a prepared battlefield, but what caught his attention was Vegeta, who was right in the dead middle of it, with a trail of blood leading from the edge of the clearing like he had crawled, or been dragged, to the middle. Regardless, even from where he was in the sky, Trunks knew it was bad. He descended down immediately, dropping roughly on his knees next to his father. There's my new half-breed pet. Right on time. Should we attack now? The fool is so concerned about Vegeta, that he hasn't noticed us. Patience, dear brother, patience. The half-breed monkey mutt won't notice us so long as we continue to hide our power. Besides, I'm curious to see what the relationship between these two is. Don't ruin my entertainment. Oh no, Trunks whispered bleakly, looking his father over. The prince was sprawled out on his back, his face a bloodied mess, but it was the ugly wound in his stomach that made Trunks' hands start to shake. At best, he was unconscious. But at worst, no, not again, not again, Trunks hissed under his breath, images of Gohan's dead body flashing through his mind as sweat ran down the back of his neck. He couldn't sense Vegeta's ki at all. He instantly checked his father's pulse with one hand, putting his other hand on Vegeta's chest to feel for any rise at all. He held both hands still for a few seconds that felt like a few decades. Vegeta wasn't breathing, but there was a faint, slow heartbeat. It was good enough. Trunks didn't waste any time. He shifted over, grabbed Vegeta's armor, and lifted it as much as he could to slide his hand underneath. He closed his eyes tightly when he felt the ice-cold skin of his father's chest, trying hard to ignore it as he searched for the bean. After a few seconds, Trunks' patience snapped, and he desperately tugged the armor off Vegeta in one haul. The bean came flying out with the hard jerk, rolling onto the dirt. He immediately retrieved it, forced his father's mouth open, and practically shoved the Senza bean inside. Trunks grabbed Vegeta and lifted him so he was sitting up, forcing the bean to go down. He sat down behind his father to support him, tried hard to ignore how cold and lifeless Vegeta felt against him, and waited. And waited. Trunks buried his face against Vegeta's shoulder, his eyes squeezed shut with hot tears that he was struggling to rein in. He waited some more. Finally, after some long and agonizing seconds to Trunks, Vegeta snorted roughly. He then broke into a fit of harsh coughs, hacking up blood. Trunks felt like the ability to breathe had been restored to both of them. He sighed in relief, while patting Vegeta on the back as the prince struggled to get his breath back. He had barely made contact though, when Vegeta threw his elbow back, almost nailing Trunks in the face. Trunks barely managed to block it, before Vegeta started to power up in what was a delirious effort to fight back against who he assumed was Freeza, still torturing him. "Father, stop it. It's me," Trunks yelled, instantly ending Vegeta's struggles. Did he just call Vegeta father? Yes, but it makes no sense. By all accounts from my men, Vegeta went through quite a bit of effort to avoid having any offspring. How could he possibly have a son, and how could I not know about it? I told you, brother. I told you to kill the monkey prince when he was a child, didn't I? Now he's fathered a Super Saiyan. This could have all been avoided if it wasn't for your arrogance. Calm yourself, Cooler. They will both die anyways. Are you blind as well? Did you not see him just heal Vegeta? Yes, but it's useful to know they have such a thing to restore health, instead of being surprised later on. It makes no difference, in any case. They're both still outclassed. Besides, look at how attached the half-breed is to my favorite prince. It's quite touching, isn't it? It took about 15 long seconds for Vegeta's wound to fully heal, while he hacked the blood out of his airway so he could breathe. Trunks stood up, grabbing Vegeta around his midsection and lifting him up to his feet. The prince doubled over with his hands on his knees, coughing up the last remnants of blood while Trunks patted him on the back. You need to stop scaring me like that. The young hybrid smiled a little in relief, but it was brief. He was relieved that his father was back on his feet, but the planet was still being purged. Vegeta finally straightened, wiping the blood off his face with his forearm. He looked down at himself, putting a hand over his stomach which was now healed. He clenched his fists tightly as he straightened, feeling new strength rushing through him. He grit his teeth. It still wasn't enough. Father, we have to dash. Trunks' words were instantly cut off when Vegeta backhanded him hard in the face with a closed fist. Trunks fell down, caught completely off guard. He looked up at his father in blank surprise, one hand cradling the side of his jaw. You gave me the bean? Vegeta furiously yelled down at him. You should have saved it for yourself, you fucking idiot. Wah, but, you were dying. You could have just wished me back. That was the last bean we had. You're still the best chance we have, and you just ruined everything by giving me the last goddamn bean instead of keeping it for yourself. Trunks' eyes flashed with anger as he got back up to his feet. Well, maybe if you wouldn't have tried to face off against Freeza without me, then you wouldn't have gotten hurt and I wouldn't have needed to use the Senza bean. Why didn't you just try to come get me? Vegeta's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. In the heat of the moment, faced with daunting odds, the obvious had slipped right past him. At the very least, he should have tried it. A rare mishap, but not as bad as the one weighing on his mind. His gaze darkened considerably as he snarled, You want to go that route with me, boy? Fine then. Why didn't you take care of Cooler like you said you did? Were you just lying to me this whole time? Did you just let him live because you were too weak to finish him off? What? Trunks asked, his face scrunching in confusion. Who are you talking about? The guy at the trials? I killed everyone there. Bullshit you did, Vegeta sneered. Cooler's alive and he's here with Freeza. Trunks growled, That's impossible. I killed him. And what, you think I punched a hole through my own stomach? Freeza snuck up on me only because I was distracted by Cooler. You didn't finish him, you imbecile. How many times have I told you that you need to make sure that you finish your enemy off? Hey, there you two are. They both looked over to see Goku flying towards them. Vegeta gave Trunks one last glare of disgust, before going over to retrieve his battered armor. Trunks exhaled slowly, staring at his father in exasperation, before looking back at Goku as he descended right next to them. Who the hell is that? I don't know, but he interrupted a very entertaining argument. Can you see his face from where you are? No. Why? He looks like the Saiyan that led the last rebellion before you destroyed the planet. Looks just like him. Bardock? It can't be him. I watched him burn to death myself. Brother, this resemblance is unmistakable. He must be a Saiyan. Well, then it's fortunate that he's here, isn't it? It's quite convenient. We can kill all the monkeys at once. Goku, what are you doing here? Trunks demanded as Goku came up to them. I helped Raditz and Gohan out. I took out enough of those aliens to give them a much better chance. Raditz said they were good with the rest of them, so he sent me here to make sure everything was alright. He looked over at Vegeta, and raised an eyebrow at his bloodied, bare back before the prince tugged down his armor over his head. Goku looked down, and blinked at the sight of all the blood in the dirt. Looks like things were rough, but I guess everything's okay now, Trunks. Not really, Trunks mumbled, frowning at his father before scanning over where they were. He stretched out his senses, but couldn't feel anyone stronger than the two Saiyans he was standing with. Freeza and Cooler are both on this planet, but I can't sense either of them. Can you? No, Goku answered, scratching the back of his head a little. Who's Cooler? Frieza's older brother. I thought I killed him a long time ago, but somehow, he lived. They're close by, Vegeta announced, finally noticing the trail of his blood in the dirt as his muscles tensed. He'd been dragged towards the center of the clearing after passing out from his pain, where they'd be in clear view. He angrily cursed under his breath before glancing around. Yes, they must be close. Be ready. They're probably watching us right now. I thought you said they didn't know how to hide their power. Trunks irritably snapped, still angry over being struck down. Vegeta cast him a hateful, sidelong glance as he sneered. They didn't, but when you clearly showed off that you were hiding your power at the trials, you showed them that it was possible, you idiot half-breed. Alright, guys, let's cool it, Goku interrupted, even though he was intensely looking around. Past the clearing were buildings that were either burning or destroyed. Rubble, smoke, corpses, blood. Goku shook his head in disbelief, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. He had never witnessed such destruction, and it hurt to see. Now's not the time. We have to work together. Trunks slowly withdrew his sword from his holster. I don't think they're close. they would have attacked by now. Listen, why don't you two go help Raditz and Gohan clean up the rest of the aliens so they don't cause more damage? I'll find Cooler and Freeza on my own. Vegeta shook his head. They're too strong, boy. You're going to need help. I can beat them both on my own. Trunks cut in, with so much confidence in his voice that it teetered on the brink of arrogance. You two aren't the only ones who got stronger in the hyperbolic time chamber. You got stronger, did you? How wonderful. I'll have a challenge after all. Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks immediately spun around, only to see Freeza standing in front of them, about 15 yards away. The tyrant offered them a smile, his arms crossed over his chest as his tail waved lazily behind him. Vegeta and Trunks both blinked at the sight of him, neither having seen him in such a form before. His armor was gone, and he was sleek and mostly white, with hints of purple. A compact killing machine. Freeza was almost unrecognizable, if it wasn't for the darkness in his eyes that was uniquely his own, and of course, his shrill voice that was unmistakable. Vegeta noticeably swallowed. Even though his horrible injury was healed, the skin across his stomach unconsciously tightened, as though fearing that it would be violently ripped open again in seconds. Always wonderful to leave an audience speechless, Freeza said with a dark chuckle. He slowly extended his arms out to his sides, making all three of his adversaries get into their fighting stances. Freeza smirked at their reaction, closing his eyes as he smugly remarked, "But, I don't blame you monkeys. I am the most powerful being in the universe, after all. I'll take care of him," Trunks whispered to the Saiyan standing behind him, tightening his grip on his sword. "You two get out of here. No one's going anywhere," a smooth voice interrupted. Without turning their backs to Freeza, everyone with Saiyan blood looked over their shoulders, only to see Cooler standing behind them, about 15 yards back. Cooler was matching his brother's smirk as Trunks' eyes took in the lower, metallic half of his body. Trunks was grinding his teeth together, mentally kicking himself. He had no idea Cooler could survive his attack. Cooler saw Trunks' expression, and his smirk spread. Vegeta was right, boy. Always make sure you finish off your opponent, and leave no doubt. Unfortunately, your mistake has cost you your life, and the lives of everyone on this pathetic planet. What's the matter, Freeza? Trunks hissed, looking back towards the younger tyrant. Had to bring your brother because you couldn't beat me on your own? Freeza chuckled again, shaking his head in amusement. My goodness. Such arrogance. You truly are Vegeta's son. Yes, it's obvious now. The resemblance is unmistakable. He laughed out loud in delight. Trunks, is it? Well, Trunks, I must say, you would make a much better addition to my growing army than your father. If you drop to your knees, boy, and swear your allegiance to me, perhaps I'll just kill the two monkeys behind you, and you can come work for me. It would be so poetic. You know what they say, like father, like son. Vegeta growled low in his throat, practically shaking with rage at the thought of the cycle between him and his father, repeating with him and his own son. He would die before ever letting it happen. Without even thinking, he charged ahead, stopped only when Trunks quickly grabbed him around his midsection to hold him back. That didn't stop the prince from furiously yelling, "No one with Saiyan blood will ever kneel before you again, you hear me, Freeza? How rude. Is that any way to talk to me after I was kind enough not to rip your heart out just moments ago?" Freeza asked with feigned hurt. "Take it easy," Trunks whispered to his father, whose key was snapping with his flaring emotions. "Why are you two doing this?" Goku demanded, his eyes locked on Cooler. "If you wanted to challenge Trunks, you could have done it without killing all those innocent people. Saiyan, you should be grateful that we only brought the weakest soldiers in the Lion Army," Cooler chuckled. "Besides, my brother insists on always having extra entertainment. So don't look at me. If it was up to me, we would have destroyed your planet by now, and where's the fun in that?" Freeza chuckled. Goku was left at a loss for words. Raditz had told him about Freeza, but it was only now, being in his dark presence, that he finally understood. Their maliciousness was almost tangible and suffocating in the night air. How Vegeta and Raditz had lived decades with the tyrant was beyond him, but what he really couldn't wrap his mind around was how two aliens could have such little regard for life. If the purging of Earth was anything like the purges Freeza had ordered hundreds of times, then he was facing evil itself for the first time in his life. He clenched his fists painfully tight, feeling raw anger rising up from deep in his chest. He was struggling to keep himself in check, but they all felt a flicker of his real power. Vegeta's head instantly snapped to Goku while he blinked in astonishment. He couldn't help but wonder how it was possible that Goku had gotten so strong, in only half a year. Goku was almost as strong as he was now. "Look at that. You've upset the weakling," Cooler snorted. He cocked his head to one side, before asking Goku, "Perhaps you'd like to do something about my brother's remarks?" "Calm down, Goku," Trunks whispered. "They're just trying to bait you into attacking first." "All right," Goku grumbled, barely able to rein himself in. "Man, I just can't get a sense of how strong these guys really are." "Cooler is extremely powerful," Vegeta quietly told them. "And Freeza is worse, but I don't know by how much." Trunks hesitated only a second, before he finally stepped forward in Frieza's direction. He extended his arm out, pointing at the tyrant with his sword, before he snarled, "Your brother stays out of this, and my father and Goku stay out of this. This fight is between us, Freeza. Me and you, one-on-one, no interference, no excuses. Or are you that much of a coward that you can't face me on your own?" Frieza's smirk disappeared at the blatant challenge. His eyes darkened, before they shifted past all of them towards his brother. A few tense seconds of silence passed as both tyrants had a silent, mental exchange. Goku and Vegeta shot each other wary glances. This was it. The Cold family would be destroyed tonight, and the universe would finally be freed from their intergalactic tyranny. Or they were all going to die, and Earth would be nothing but space dust before the night was done. Very well, boy. I will face you alone, Freeza calmly said. He chuckled, slowly raising one finger which he waved in warning. But, if Vegeta and that Bardock clone try to get involved, all bets are off. Trunks, Vegeta's voice rang through his son's mind. Trunks eyed him out of the corner of his eye. They might not keep their word if Freeza starts losing. You have to end this, fast. You can't show him any mercy, because he won't show you any if he has the chance. Trunks gave a subtle nod, before his blue eyes shifted to his enemy. He was ending this, tonight, or he would die trying. I don't need anyone's help, unlike you, Trunks sneered. Well then, what are you waiting for, boy? Go on. Stop hiding your power. Show me just what the Saiyan race has to offer, Freeza sneered back. Almost casually, Trunks removed the holster for his sword, and then shrugged out of his leather jacket, leaving him in a black capsule Corp muscle tank Bulma had given him. Trunks then flashed a smirk. As you wish. His ki suddenly and violently exploded around him in a blinding gold light, forcing Vegeta and Goku to stagger backwards away from him and fall down. They both had to raise their arms to protect their eyes as dust rose up around Trunks in a powerful vortex, before he shot up into the air. Dark clouds gathered overhead as the air rushed around Trunks, who let out an unearthly scream as his true potential ripped through him, golden electricity surrounding him in a cloak of fierce energy. His muscle mass easily doubled, nearly tearing his tank into pieces as his body accommodated the enormous strength exploding through him. His shoulder-length, golden hair stood on end as his entire body shook with tides of power he had never tapped into before. The Saiyans down below could only stare, slack-jawed and wide-eyed, neither having seen his power surge to such extraordinary levels before. The Cold brothers were both watching Trunks, their expressions calm, collected, and well-guarded. Freeza watched Trunks power up for a few more seconds, before a malicious smirk spread on his face as he slowly extended his arms again. He had seen enough. It was time to unleash his own power. Goku and Vegeta immediately looked back at Freeza as his power suddenly rose in a breakneck pace that easily matched Trunks. The ground was shaking like there was an earthquake from the amount of power the tyrant was generating, as violent pressure waves were unleashed. A dark red ki surrounded Freeza, before he quickly levitated into the air, matching Trunks' altitude. They were now face to face, and evenly matched in strength. But the tyrant only cackled, looking like he was having the time of his life. You have no idea how privileged you are, boy. Freeza yelled at Trunks, before flashing a grin. No one has ever forced me to go to my perfect form, much less to rely on ancient energy sharing with my brother to enhance my power. Trunks' power settled at his maximum, before he raised an eyebrow. Energy sharing. Indeed. You would have had an advantage before, had you caught me by surprise. But monkeys never were that smart, were they? Now my power is endless, boy. Don't listen to him. Vegeta's voice furiously cut in through Trunks' thoughts. He'll say anything to get you to doubt yourself. I've heard of that ancient technique, and it's not endless. They're just leeching power off each other. If you kill one of them, then their power will drop back to normal. Trunks nodded. He tightened his grip on his sword, drew in a deep breath, and then rocketed right towards Freeza, who was also closing the distance between them at light speed. Trunks raised his sword over his head and quickly brought it down to slice the tyrant in half, but Freeza phased out of sight, reappearing right behind him. Trunks ducked, avoiding a ruthless kick from behind that would have taken his head off, and then they both phased out of sight. For a few seconds, no one below could see either of them, but they could hear the powerful blows being blocked and see the brief flashes of golden and red lights from their ki. Vegeta's fists were drawing blood from how hard they were clenched. He was barely able to keep up with the fight as he silently willed his son on. Finally, the fight came to an abrupt stop when Trunks landed the first punch, nailing Freeza right in the face. The tyrant absorbed the blow with a hiss, and then quickly retaliated by burying his knee hard against Trunks' stomach. Trunks gasped as he doubled over, feeling blood rising in his throat. He had never been hit so hard in his life. Freeza grabbed him by the hair and forced him backwards, raising one powerful fist back, when Trunks took a swing at him with his sword. Freeza phased out of sight again. Trunks looked frantically around, trying to catch sight of Freeza. The tyrant suddenly appeared right behind him, landing a vicious kick to the base of Trunks' spine. Trunks crashed back to the ground almost instantly, and there was a wild explosion from his landing as the ground was caved and dust rose up into the air. Vegeta took an unconscious step forward before Goku grabbed him by the arm. Remember, we can't get involved. Coolers watching, Goku whispered. I wasn't going to get involved, you idiot. And don't fucking touch me. Vegeta yelled in Goku's face, yanking his arm free. He turned back to the action, his jaw clenched tight. He was trying not to be emotionally involved, but he was failing. Trunks was his son, and he was facing Freeza, his mortal enemy. There was no one in the universe who could have been more invested in this battle than the Saiyan Prince. Frieza's shrill laughter sliced through the air. A worthy opponent at last. I shall truly enjoy breaking you, boy. Get up, Vegeta mentally urged his son, who was struggling to get back up to his hands and knees, visibly shaken by the blow to his back and the subsequent impact. Freeza shot down like a torpedo towards Trunks as Vegeta furiously sent, "Get up, Trunks!" Trunks' golden ki exploded around him again as he shot back up into the air in a golden blur, right as Freeza brutally slammed his knee down into the ground where Trunks' head had been, missing by mere nanoseconds. Freeza sneered angrily as he looked back up towards the Saiyan hybrid, his tail whipping into the ground, cracking it on impact. The tyrant instantly shot into the air in a beam of red light, and Trunks swung his sword down right as they were about to meet. Freeza phased out of sight and kicked the sword out of his hands, and then they both began exchanging lightning-fast misses. It was a blur of moves, blocks, and creative aerial assaults in the hand-to-hand combat that looked like a stalemate. Something is wrong, Goku whispered to Vegeta, who was sweating like he was the one in an intense life-or-death battle. They're equal in strength, but shut up, Kakarot. Vegeta venomously snarled, his eye twitching as he watched Freeza break the stalemate by kicking Trunks hard in the side of the head. Trunks instantly responded, breaking the hand-to-hand combat by firing a powerful golden ki blast that nailed Freeza right in the face, forcing him to back up in midair. Trunks charged right at Freeza, before they both phased out of sight again. Shit, Vegeta cursed a minute later as he watched the battle continue. The fool is right. Something is wrong. The longer the fight went, the more it looked like Freeza was gaining the advantage. Trunks looked like he was struggling more and more to keep up with Frieza's outstanding speed, and the longer it went, the more punishment Trunks was taking. Vegeta grit his teeth when Freeza slammed an elbow right to Trunks' ribs, making him cough up blood. Trunks furiously, almost desperately, swung back, but Freeza ducked almost with ease, coming up behind the Saiyan hybrid. Before Trunks could even turn around, Freeza had already fired a ki blast of his own that hit Trunks square in the back. Once again, Trunks crashed into the ground, this time with so much force that it almost knocked Goku and Vegeta off their feet. He can't keep up, Vegeta relented dismally, feeling like his tongue was burned just by admitting it out loud. He's not fast enough. I know, Goku whispered, watching as Trunks shakily forced himself to get back up to his hands and knees. He's got so much strength, but he compromised completely with his speed. They both fell into a tense silence, neither of them wanting to admit the truth out loud. Trunks was their best shot, but he was going to lose this fight. The only way to regain his speed was to lose some of his power, but Freeza would still be just as strong, and just as fast. It was only a matter of time before Freeza finally wore him down enough and ended the battle permanently. Vegeta glanced subtly over at Cooler, who was preoccupied with the battle between his brother and Trunks. He then looked back at the battle, and opened up a mental link with Goku. Kakarot, listen. Vegeta sent, earning a startled look from Goku. The prince kept his eyes forward as he continued, we have to help Trunks. He can't do this alone. But, how shut up. Vegeta snapped harshly. He could feel Cooler's gaze shifting on them, and it made the small hairs on the back of his neck rise as fresh sweat broke out on his body. He was so sure that Cooler was about to attack them, that he spread out his fingers at his side to start gathering up energy to defend himself. But Cooler looked casually back at the battle, smirking in approval as the fight became more and more one-sided in Frieza's favor. Vegeta took a deep breath, willing his heart to slow down. Finally, he mentally sent don't speak out loud. You'll draw Cooler's attention, you moron. Just listen. I have a plan, but we have to do it fast if we're going to have a shot at this. Goku said nothing, but Vegeta heard back, what's your plan? Trunks was becoming desperate. His speed disadvantage was now brutally obvious, and Freeza had already sniffed it out and was taking full advantage like a rabid shark. Trunks turned around in midair, only to catch another hard punch to the face, forcing blood to fly out of his mouth. What's the matter, monkey? Can't keep up? I thought this was going to be a challenge. Freeza mocked. Trunks growled and phased out of sight, trying to get some new kind of angle to regain an advantage in the fight that was quickly slipping out of his grasp. As soon as he phased in behind Freeza though, the tyrant did a midair backflip, dodging a kick from Trunks. Come on, boy. Fight me. Freeza shouted, flying higher into the sky as Trunks glared up at him, short of breath now. The Saiyan hybrid drew back his hands, and blue light sparked up between them as he started gathering up energy. Vegeta and Goku exchanged a glance, and shared in a subtle nod as Freeza cackled, that's the spirit, monk. Frieza's words were abruptly cut off when Vegeta phased in right behind him. The prince hooked his arms underneath Frieza's, locking them back and holding him in place, doing it so fast that Freeza didn't have time to react. Down below, Goku's Kaioken was in full effect as he landed a brutal kick right to Cooler's head, catching the alien completely by surprise. Fire, Trunks! Vegeta screamed, his muscles strained past the brink as he exerted every ounce of strength he had to keep Freeza in place for the split second that it would take Trunks to fire his attack. Trunks pulled back to fire, but he hesitated for a fleeting fraction of a second. He could kill Freeza right now, but would he kill Vegeta at the same time? It took a brief, precious moment of time for Trunks to remember that he could just wish Vegeta back with the Dragon Balls if need be, before he fired the most powerful ki blast he could possibly generate. But by then, it was already too late. Freeza threw his head back, slamming the back of his head right into Vegeta's face. The blow alone damn near knocked Vegeta out cold, before Freeza broke through his grasp and then promptly smashed his elbow hard into the prince's neck, forcing the Saiyan to crash back down to the ground. Freeza then turned back, saw the blast spiraling up towards him, and just barely flipped out of the way. God damn it! Trunks screamed in frustration, panting from gathering up the energy for his attack. He looked down below, where an enraged Cooler had already recovered. He charged right at Goku, who gave a valiant effort of trying to defend himself, but he was outclassed. It wasn't long before Cooler fired a vicious and powerful ki blast into Goku's chest, sending him flying out of the dirt clearing and crashing into a faraway burning building. Trunks watched it all happen, furiously grinding his teeth together, while Freeza laughed. "Well, looks like Vegeta and his little friend have broken our arrangement. It seems to me, my half-breed pet, that the deal is off." "Cooler? I do believe you wanted to participate, didn't you, dear brother?" Freeza asked in mock politeness, glancing down towards his older brother. Cooler down below smirked sadistically. His usual MO was to finish off who he was killing fast. It was a waste of time to do otherwise. Long torture sessions were Frieza's game, but tonight, he was willing to play that game. Trunks could barely react before he found himself trying to defend himself against both cold brothers at the same time. Cooler wasn't as strong as Freeza, but fighting at this speed, it hardly made a difference. Whenever Trunks could land a blow on one, the other capitalized. He was fighting with desperation, which only made him start to slip in his technique. Freeza capitalized with a tenacity that proved why he was the most feared warrior in the universe, kneeing Trunks so hard in the stomach, Trunks could practically feel his insides being destroyed. He doubled over, not even able to take one breath before Cooler roughly grabbed a handful of his golden hair and forced Trunks to arch backwards, letting Freeza slam his elbow hard into Trunks' chest. Meanwhile, down below, Vegeta slowly struggled up to his hands and knees. His ears were ringing, and he raised a shaking hand to rub his eyes, trying to clear his vision from Frieza's blows. Goku was crawling over to him, badly burned by Cooler's attack. He sluggishly forced himself back up to his feet, and then grabbed Vegeta by the back of the armor with one hand, lifting the prince back up his feet. Vegeta angrily pulled free, resting his hands on his hips, one eye squeezed shut. "Listen, Vegeta," Goku breathed out. "I think I can do some damage to Cooler. He's not as fast and he's not as sharp as Freeza." They both watched as Trunks landed back on the ground hard, coughing roughly when he did. His body was shaking as he slowly sat up, sweat running into his eyes. He forced himself to dive out of the way though when Freeza sent a powerful ki blast directly at him. The ground ruptured where he had just been. "Spit out your plan, Kakarot." Vegeta impatiently snarled. "I worked hard in the hyperbolic time chamber, and I got my best attack down to maybe 15 seconds to fully charge up. You're a little stronger than me, so you can last longer against Cooler. If you can maybe distract." Dash's words were interrupted by Vegeta's blue ki erupting around him in a flash of light, and then the prince was gone. Cooler was in midair, firing a barrage of ki blasts that were practically hitting Trunks' heels as the Saiyan hybrid sprinted away for his life. The alien's attack came to an abrupt stop, however, when Vegeta came in from out of nowhere and barreled right into him in midair as hard as he could. He and Cooler flew back down to the ground, crashing together in an explosion of their own. Freeza looked over at them in surprise, and Trunks capitalized on the distraction, phasing in right behind the tyrant and kicking him hard in the neck. Trunks' second wind had kicked in, and his fight with Freeza was back on. Goku dropped down to one knee, and pulled his hands back. Dirt and debris started to rise up around him in response to his power as his red aura flared up around him, his powerful blue ki burning bright in his hands. Me. Vegeta had only taken a few shots from Cooler, but they were bone-jarring blows. The Saiyan frantically blasted up into the air, to gain leverage and also to distract Cooler from the attack that was being generated on the ground. Me. Goku's hands were shaking, his muscles strained as his energy skyrocketed. Vegeta was taking one a hell of a beating, but he was just barely hanging in there. Meanwhile, Freeza finally noticed what was going on. He spun around, wide-eyed, and was going to scream at his idiotic brother to look out when Trunks phased in and cut off his words with a hard punch to the face that rocked the tyrant. Freeza sent the warning mentally though, and Cooler finally noticed Goku whose power had surged beyond what he thought him capable of. Vegeta suddenly phased in behind Cooler, and instantly hooked his arms like he'd done to Freeza. Goku fired a blast capable of destroying entire worlds, and Vegeta squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the impact. Cooler screamed, drawing Frieza's attention again. Trunks once again capitalized again on the distraction, quickly gathering up every scrap of energy he had left. When Freeza turned back to face him, Trunks fired his most powerful blast of the night straight at him. The waves of ki hit both tyrants dead on, and the light exploded with screams of pain that echoed for miles, while the earth was rocked almost to the core. Goku's hands were still shaking as he finally lowered them, when things had settled a bit. He squinted through the dust, not able to see a thing. Up above, Trunks was panting as he strained his senses, though he wasn't able to feel either cold brother. "Father?" Trunks suddenly sent out in a panic, remembering the position Vegeta had been in. "I'm fine," Vegeta's weak voice responded. The prince was sprawled out on the dirt on his back, unable to stop the tremors spreading through his body. The power of Goku's attack had been completely overwhelming, he had severely underestimated it, and he hadn't even taken the brunt of the attack. But had it worked? Vegeta raised his head with effort, and instinctively flinched in shock when Goku phased in next to him. He eyed the younger Saiyan warily, wondering if Goku was about to kill him while he was weakened. "You okay?" Goku asked, extending a hand down to Vegeta. The prince blinked at him in confusion, before scowling at his hand. He slapped it away. "Where the hell are they?" Vegeta demanded. "I dunno," Goku responded with a frown, squinting as he tried to get a glimpse of one of the brothers. "I can't sense them or feel them or anything. Think we got him? No, it couldn't have been so easy. They must still be around here then. Probably regrouping," Vegeta growled, slowly sitting up while heavily favoring his ribs. That attack definitely must have hurt Cooler, he added in a heated grumble. Man, I sure hope so. I put everything I had in that, Goku said, only now starting to catch his breath again. Trunks, meanwhile, could hear them both but was too busy trying to get sight of Freeza and Cooler. He slowly descended back to the ground, away from Vegeta and Goku, eyeing his fallen sword which was a few feet away. He struggled to catch his breath, as he waited for some sign of either enemy. It was silent. Trunks quietly squatted down, ignoring the pain in his legs, and retrieved his sword, keeping his eyes up and glancing around while he did. He stood up again, and scowled, continuing his surveillance. It was too silent. Vegeta was back up on his feet, and had staggered away from Goku to stretch his senses for either brother. Goku went in the opposite direction, with his fists tightly clenched. They all tried to spot something. The silence was that of death, but all three of them could hear their heartbeats clearly. Goku's heart in particular picked up when he suddenly felt Raditz and Gohan flying back to them. He reached out mentally to his brother to warn him to stay away, and to definitely keep Gohan away, when they all suddenly felt it. A powerful blast of yellow ki sliced through the night air before anyone could even react. Trunks didn't even have time to turn around, before the blast impaled him through his back, and exited from his chest. Goku and Vegeta both immediately spun back towards him, just in time to see Trunks' sword slowly fall from his hand. He then collapsed face first into the dirt, in what was horrifically slow motion to Vegeta. Trunks' golden aura slowly disappeared, and his hair faded back to a sweaty lavender. He didn't move again. I am done with these games, Freeza snarled, standing on the outskirts of the makeshift battleground. He was on top of the remnants of a building that was falling apart and on fire, and Cooler wasn't too far away. If you want something done, you have to do it yourself. Cooler suddenly attacked him before he had even finished the word, but Freeza was expecting it. He phased out of sight right before Cooler got to him, reappeared right behind him, and then ruthlessly sliced his own brother's head off with a blade of ki at the edge of his hand. Freeza threw his head back and callously laughed out loud at his victory. First Trunks, now his brother. The planet Hell, the whole goddamned universe, was now officially his for the taking. No one was paying him or Cooler any attention though. Goku and Vegeta both charged over to Trunks as soon as he hit the dirt, without a word or a moment's hesitation, though Vegeta did have enough wits to pick up Trunks' jacket on the way. They had turned him over onto his back by the time Freeza looked back at them, and the tyrant quickly started to prepare 2 orbs of ki on both hands to strike the Saiyans down if they were planning on healing the boy. However, when their frantic effort to save Trunks didn't look like it was going to include giving him whatever healed Vegeta earlier, Freeza dissipated the energy and watched them in cruel amusement, crossing his arms over his chest. It didn't matter one bit that his power had dropped considerably now that he was without Cooler's aid, going back down to his own maximum power. After all, he no longer had a challenge. But, for once, Freeza was the last thing on Vegeta's mind. He was only focused on his son. Not wasting any time, Vegeta quickly ripped Trunks' leather jacket to pieces, and then covered the wound on his chest with the shreds of leather as he applied pressure. Goku tore at his burnt GI top to do the same. Trunks was convulsing weakly under them as Goku put the shreds of his top around Vegeta's hand. The prince nervously spared his son's face a glance. Trunks' face was white and covered in sweat as he made wet gurgling sounds, fighting the overwhelming darkness creeping into his vision as he struggled to keep his eyes open. "Stay with me, kid," Vegeta ordered. His gaze shifted over when he felt warmth on his knees. There was blood pooling from underneath Trunks, and Vegeta cursed under his breath when he saw it. Kakarot. "We need more for his back," he said, his voice suddenly rough and his motions more desperate as he tried removing some shreds of leather that were already drenched in blood. Goku frowned. He put one hand on Trunks' forehead, only to find him in a cold sweat. His eyes were rolling back, the blood running freely from his nose and his mouth. Goku looked up at the frantic prince across from him, who was visibly shaking. "Vegeta, shut the fuck up and help me, Kakarot." Vegeta barked at him. Goku put his hand over Vegeta's hand which was applying the pressure on Trunks' chest. At the contact, Vegeta finally stopped. He looked up and made eye contact with the younger Saiyan. Goku shook his head. The prince looked back down at Trunks' chest. The blood loss was too much, too fast. Trunks' heart was completely destroyed. Vegeta had seen this injury a million times, inflicted the same injury a million more times. Without extremely fast intervention with a rejuvenation chamber, or something magical like a Senza bean, it was fatal. Always was. Always had been. And with no one left to defeat Freeza, they weren't going to live long enough to go to Namek. He wasn't going to be able to wish his son back. There was nothing he could do. He looked up at his son's face. The boy was deathly pale. More unconscious than not, Trunks was struggling to raise his head. Goku withdrew his hand from Trunks' forehead, and it was replaced by Vegeta's bloody one. "Take it easy, kid," Vegeta said, his voice raw. For some reason, it was unbelievably hard for him to speak. Trunks tried speaking, but couldn't. All he could taste was blood. He rested his head back and his unfocused eyes briefly settled on Vegeta's. "Father. I'm sorry," he managed to weakly convey. "You should be, you stupid son of a bitch," Vegeta softly sent back. "How many times have I told you to always watch your back? I didn't kill him. I'm sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry about, Trunks. You did well. I'm proud of you, son." Trunks managed a weak smile for a second, before his eyes finally slid closed. His weak convulsions stopped, and he was still. Vegeta fisted a handful of Trunks' bloodied tank top, his eyes tightly squeezed shut. He thought he had experienced pain before. He was wrong. This was true pain, ripping through his chest, freezing his body, burning his soul. A soul he never even knew he had. Goku was saying something to him, but Vegeta couldn't hear him. His mind was suddenly replaying memories, torturing him with things Trunks had said, things he had said, and things that should have been said. Heat flooded his eyes, burning them with heartbreaking loss, as his hardened and callous shell that he had worn his entire life finally shattered to pieces. "Do you swear your allegiance to me, boy, on your father's honor?" "Yes. I would die for you." Vegeta let go of Trunks' tank, one shaking hand going up to cover his face, unknowingly smearing his face with Trunks' blood like it was war paint. He tried valiantly to keep his tears at bay, but at the thought that he had just lost the only person who gave a damn about him, the only person since he was younger than Gohan to ever give a damn about him, he fell apart. "You could be so much better. Yes, a better warrior. A better man." Fire suddenly exploded through Vegeta's veins. His whole body started shaking in response. Vegeta ran his hands up through his hair. He clenched tight fistfuls of it and bent over, grinding his teeth as the ground started to shake around them. He never noticed Goku dragging Trunks away from him. He never noticed that Raditz and Gohan had finally arrived, and that all eyes were on him now. He never noticed that Freeza was laughing at him. All he knew was that he was losing control. And the more he struggled to get a grasp on his power, the more it slipped away from him. "Told you not to come back." "You did. Why?" "Because you're my father." "I had to." The night sky darkened. The animal in his blood was clawing at his skin, raging to be unleashed. It snarled for vengeance, and the raw sound unconsciously ripped from Vegeta's mouth. His ki surged to new levels, making lightning crack the night sky in response. His parents, his planet, his freedom, his tail, his sanity. Now his son, Trunks, the only one he had left. Freeza had taken everything from him, and this time, it was just too much. Vegeta threw his hands back in tight fists, reared his head back and screamed with soul-wrenching rage. A potent pressure wave suddenly exploded from him, forcing everyone with Saiyan blood back to the ground and forcing Freeza to shoot up into the air, as all buildings within miles were leveled from the sheer magnitude of power that was released. Electric destiny shot up from Vegeta's feet, up through his spine, up through the spikes of his hair, charging his dark hair until it sparked gold. It shot back down again, fast as lightning, charging every muscle with strength capable of ending the universe. Vegeta's screams intensified, his throat and chest feeling like they were going to rupture as a wave of forceful energy blew up around him. The ground rumbled violently in response to his inhuman rage as a brilliant light of gold suddenly swept over him. Voltage shot back up and burned his eyes, making them flash teal behind his tears. It shot through his whole body with relentless fury until Vegeta felt like he was going to die from the sheer energy ripping from every pore of his body. He screamed with a wrath 25 years in the making as the animal inside of him was finally unleashed. Vegeta's ki ruptured violently, and blinding gold light eclipsed the battlefield. When it finally cleared, Goku and Raditz looked back over at him, and could only blink in shock. Vegeta was standing now, encased in golden flames that were raging with the pain of a lifetime. His hair was flickering gold as he slowly turned around. His eyes were teal with raw vengeance as he glared up at an absolutely stunned Freeza. Vegeta was practically frothing with rage, his physical pain long forgotten as he shifted into a fight stance. His boot dug into the dirt stained with his son's blood as he readied himself for the battle he'd been waiting for his entire life. Without further hesitation or a word of warning, Vegeta blasted into the air in a golden blur, with Freeza in his sights. CH20 of 23 next. Loving this tale? Support Infinite Novel by subscribing for weekly audio adventures. Chapter 21. When the dust settles, Freeza saw what was happening, and reacted instinctively by firing a powerful barrage of bright red ki blasts down at the Saiyan who was shooting up towards him in a blind rage. The tyrant blasted off higher into the air to gain more leverage while the ground below was rocked, continuing to fire blast after blast in his anger and shock over the transformation he had just witnessed. Never in the decades spent with the Saiyan Prince had he ever thought Vegeta capable of such raw power, for if that had been the case, he would have executed him personally as a boy. Freeza fired blast after blast while continuing to rocket up in the air, changing up the trajectory of his assault randomly to leave no chance for escape. The smoke continued to soar up higher into the air in response to the deadly and relentless attack as Freeza panted. Through a small parting in the smoke, he caught a flash of gold, and panic ran down the tyrant's back through the tip of his tail. Vegeta would have never survived such an attack before. In a feverish frenzy, Freeza tried firing his blasts faster, only to realize that the magnificent power he had wielded against Trunks was truly out of reach with Cooler dead. Before Freeza could think of another strategy, his eyes widened in shock as Vegeta furiously blasted through the dark smoke from the ki blasts, unscathed and with single-minded, vengeful purpose. All Freeza saw was a golden blur of light, before Vegeta struck him in the side of the head with the hardest punch the Saiyan had ever thrown in his life. The prince remained high in the air, watching Freeza barrel head over heels down towards the ground from the violent blow. Grinding his teeth together, Vegeta flared up his golden aura, his hatred cracking in the night air along with his ki. Far from bringing his bloodlust under control, Vegeta was shaking with rage as he pulled his hands back, bright blue ki flashing as he prepared his Gallic gun attack. The ki was already pulsing and growing with deadly intent even before Freeza crash landed back into the ground. Electricity shot up around Vegeta, and he barely noticed his own power until a panicked and familiar voice suddenly cut through the haze of hatred in his mind. "Vegeta! That attack will be too powerful. Goku mentally shouted. Get out of my head, Kakarot. Vegeta furiously sent back. But you'll destroy the whole plan, I don't care. Just to prove his point, Vegeta purposely put more power into attack as sparks of electricity surrounded his shaking hands. At the same time, he used his discipline to bring his mind back under his control so he wouldn't be receptive to any of the Saiyans on the ground. This was his fight, and he was going to fight it however he damn well pleased. In doing so, however, a revelation finally broke through his thoughts. This attack was going to kill Freeza, but his old master didn't deserve such an easy death. Why the hell was he going to give him one? It would be merciful to end this fast, but no one deserved less mercy than Freeza. He isn't backing down, Goku hissed to his brother. He had quickly grabbed Trunks while Raditz had grabbed Gohan, and they had hurriedly gotten out of the way when Freeza started firing his missile-like attacks. Now they were kneeling out of sight, watching the battle that was unfolding. Goku had his eyes locked on Vegeta, grinding his teeth as he added, I can't let him fire that attack dash, don't get involved, Kakarot, Raditz growled, hardly aware of Gohan standing very close behind his legs and peeking out at the fight. Ahead of them, Freeza was visibly struggling to stand again. This is Freeza we're talking about, and this is Vegeta's fight. He'll kill you if you get involved. Believe me, but he's going to destroy the PLA dash, he's not. He would have fired already. Look, they both looked back up, and sure enough, Vegeta still hadn't fired. The Saiyan was too far up in the sky for them to see what he was doing, but when Goku looked back over at Freeza, he immediately put 2 and 2 together. He's going to draw this out, he realized. He's going to make this last as long as possible. Raditz nodded his agreement, and was about to chime in that such a death would be well deserved, when Vegeta abandoned his Gallic gun power-up and instead flew right back down towards Freeza, intent on beating the tyrant to death with his bare hands. The only warnings Freeza received as he regained his balance were Vegeta's ki rising in a flash of golden light, and then there was a massive explosion as the action moved far too fast for Goku and Raditz to see. But even before the thick dust had cleared, they knew that in those fractions of nanoseconds, something had gone very wrong, and when they heard Frieza's shrill laughter triumphantly cutting the air, they knew that the battle was only beginning. Didn't see that one coming, now did you, my prince? Freeza mockingly asked, cackling in delight. He was panting, his muscles visibly strained and bulging as he pulled Vegeta's arms painfully behind him. The prince was in a crater on the ground, Frieza's foot firmly on his back, his face twisted in pain. In a cheap shot that he hadn't anticipated, Freeza had formed a long, razor-sharp blade of purple ki from his hand down to his elbow, deeply slicing into Vegeta's armor and skin over his ribs before the prince could land his attack. Clouded in his rage, Vegeta hadn't seen it until it was too late, and he had crashed into the ground, damaging himself with his own momentum. You dare challenge me? Freeza shouted down at him, lowering his foot and brutally shoving the heel where he knew Vegeta's tail stub would be. The prince spasmed in agony, squeezing his eyes shut and desperately sinking his teeth into the rock ground so he wouldn't cry out. He tried harboring the raw power inside of him that he had just wielded moments ago, but his inexperience with that power was completely handicapping him. The profuse bleeding over his ribs wasn't helping either, making it harder for him to breathe. Just because you have a new hair color and eye color doesn't mean you can beat me. You're not a Super Saiyan. You're not a prince. You're nothing. Nothing but a worthless monkey. And now you're going to die like one. Freeza shrieked, hooking Vegeta's arms with his tail and firing a ki blast right into the side of the Saiyan's armor where he was bleeding. The prince ripped more into the rock ground with his teeth as his body shook with humiliation, agony, and rage all at once. His control over his power was slipping by the second, and he wasn't aware of it, but his teal eyes briefly flashed black before he squeezed them shut. He forced the chaos in his mind to settle into what had triggered his power in the first place. His son, Trunks. He was going to avenge him and every other Saiyan killed by Freeza, or die trying, and if he was going to die, he would be damned to do so at this bastard's feet. Freeza tried to keep his grip on the prince who was furiously struggling to break free. It was raw strength against raw strength. He was gripping Vegeta's wrists, pulling his arms back unnaturally with so much force, he would have ripped off anyone else's arms by now. But the prince was resisting the motion with just as much force, and they were at a brief stalemate. Their arms were shaking, and the veins on Vegeta's bare arms were pronounced as his new power slowly pulsed through his body. Freeza started to panic as he felt the strength returning to the prince. The tyrant hastily put a white foot down firmly on Vegeta's upper back to keep him in place, but he could practically feel the Saiyan's power zapping the air around them as a golden aura surrounded him once again. Just as Vegeta was tapping into that power he desperately needed to overpower his enemy, Freeza suddenly let him go. Vegeta spun around quickly, just in time to see Gohan land right in front of him, giving him his back. The prince sat back, rolling his shoulders to alleviate the blazing pain there, one hand going to his side to stop the bleeding. Still, he couldn't keep the shock off his face when he looked over and saw Freeza about 20 yards away and eating dirt. Gohan! Goku and Raditz both yelled in alarm. Vegeta grit his teeth, furiously watching the scene play out in front of him. Oh man, Gohan whispered, gulping a little. He had seen the brief change in Vegeta's eyes and had only wanted to help. But now he wondered how smart his decision had been when Freeza slowly turned his deadly gaze to him. The boy took a wary step back, but had no time to do anything else before Freeza suddenly and furiously shrieked, "You will pay for that with your blood, boy." Just as Freeza blasted towards Gohan to kill the young hybrid, he was interrupted by Goku phasing in right in front of his son. The Saiyan barely managed to block a hard punch, but he couldn't stop the knee that plowed right into his stomach. Gaku wheezed for air, his hands going around his stomach as he collapsed to his knees in front of Freeza. "You Saiyans just don't know when to quit," Freeza hissed, raising one hand and curling it into a tight fist to deliver the killing blow. Gaku looked back up at him, prepared to fight to the death to protect his son as he readied himself to strike back. He never got the chance. Vegeta suddenly phased in right behind Freeza, his hand instantly locking around the tyrant's wrist in an unbreakable grip and stopping the attack before it began. Freeza froze, his eyes widening in shock when he felt the strength in Vegeta's hand as the Saiyan slowly started to crush his wrist to pieces. Freeza howled, shooting Vegeta a look of sheer rage. "Sorry, Freeza, but Kakarot will die by my hand and no one else's, much less yours," Vegeta growled, his golden aura flaring as he raised his ki. With every moment that passed, he was slowly gaining control over the power that had only been available with intense rage. It was strumming inside of his blood, settling with his normal ki and igniting it, giving him strength he never imagined. "How dare you! I should have killed you when I had the chance, along with your entire, pathetic, worthless race," an enraged Freeza screeched, furiously throwing an elbow back to hit Vegeta in the head, and then they both phased out of sight. Gaku scrambled back up to his feet, going over to Gohan to shield him while they watched. He could only catch parts of the battle, since things were moving too fast. Not too far off the ground, Freeza and Vegeta were in a heated battle, exchanging hard shots in a fight of mental toughness as well as physical toughness. But while Freeza was getting slowed down by his injuries, Vegeta was feeding off of his own. Freeza finally broke through, whipping Vegeta hard across the face with his tail, forcing the prince to spin around and fall back to the ground. Vegeta landed on his hands and knees, shaking his head rapidly to recover. Freeza immediately capitalized, growing an enormous purple ball of ki in the palm of his hand as he eyed the Saiyan with pure hatred. "Take this, monkey," the tyrant shrieked, hurling the purple ball down right as Vegeta looked over his shoulder. The ki ball struck him dead on with the light surrounding him, and then it exploded, forcing Gaku and Raditz to shield Trunks and Gohan from the blast that followed. Freeza slowly floated up into the air, panting as he did. A smirk began to spread over his face as he cackled with madness. There was no sign of the prince, as well there shouldn't have been. No one could have survived that. It took a few seconds before he realized that someone was laughing with him. Freeza blinked, ceasing his mad laughter, and then he heard it more clearly. Looking around, he tried seeing where that laughter was coming from, but he couldn't see anything. "You know what's really funny?" Vegeta's voice cut through the air, sounding like he was just behind Freeza. The tyrant spun around but saw nothing. He hissed through his nose in frustration while Vegeta mockingly laughed again. "The fact that you thought you ever stood a chance in this fight. Where are you?" Freeza snarled, his tail whipping back and forth. "Come out and fight, you coward." Impossibly fast, Vegeta appeared and roughly forced Freeza to the ground, his white, bloodied boot firmly planted behind the tyrant's head. The tyrant desperately struggled, but the pressure Vegeta was applying on his head was excruciating. Freeza raised one hand to try to fire a blast to force Vegeta off him, but the prince rapidly and ruthlessly brought his other boot down on that hand hard, crushing it and earning a pained shriek from Freeza. Vegeta had heard these cries before from millions over his lifetime, but it had never sounded as sweet as it did now. "Coward?" Vegeta yelled down, his gloved fists balling up with rage as he mercilessly drove his foot into Frieza's skull, earning another pained and infuriated screech. "You're the one who took me from my father when I was a small boy and then lied to me about saving his life. There is only one coward here, and that's you. Vegeta, please." Frieza desperately shrieked, saying whatever it took to save himself now. "I practically raised you. I protected shut up. You killed my family, my entire race, and now you've killed my son." Vegeta roared, shifting his leg down and delivering a bone-breaking blow to Frieza's back. It was payback for all the times the tyrant had damn near crippled him beyond what the rejuvenation tanks could heal, and the raw sound of pain released from the tyrant was music to his ears. Vegeta reached down in a fevered attempt to cause more pain and tear off the closest limb he could reach, which was Frieza's arm. He only managed to get a grip though, before Gaku phased in right in front of them. Gaku's eyes narrowed. "Vegeta, that's enough, it's over." His words stalled when Vegeta let go of Frieza's arm and pointed right at his heart in warning, a small ball of blue ki forming on his fingertip. "You and I will have our day in the future, Kakarot, I guarantee you," Vegeta growled, his teal eyes swarming with vengeance. "That day isn't today, not when you haven't ascended yet and you're not a challenge. But if you don't back the fuck up right now, I will kill you right here in front of your son. What's it going to be?" Gaku took one slow step back, more to calm the prince's temper than out of fear. While Vegeta was stronger than him at this moment in time, he wasn't afraid of him. If anything, he was understanding of the man for the first time since they'd met. "Do what you want, Vegeta. I can't stop you anyways," Gaku finally said after a tense silence only broken by Frieza's helpless struggling under Vegeta's foot. "But he's asking for mercy, and..." Gaku's words suddenly died as images flashed through his mind of Frieza and Vegeta, horrible images that showed him pain and suffering the likes of which he'd never even imagined. He was seeing the prince as a boy, barely older than his own son, enduring tortures that would have broken men 5 times his age. It was a never-ending cycle of violence that left Gaku reeling, until the images mercifully stopped. He gazed at Vegeta in shock, not believing that the prince had projected all of that to him, when he heard "That's why you need to stay the hell out of this." Except that wasn't Vegeta's voice. That was Raditz speaking. Gaku looked back at his brother in amazement, and when he saw the serious look he received in return, he numbly nodded. He looked back at Vegeta and Frieza, and took another step back. While he usually thought people could change, from what Raditz had told and shown him, and from what he'd seen himself, Freeza wasn't fitting the bill. Vegeta didn't know, and would never know, why Goku backed off, but he didn't care. Turning his attention back to Freeza, he finally raised his boot, making the tyrant gasp in relief. His tail was twitching, as were his legs. The prince paid that no mind as he slowly walked around so he was in front of the tyrant, and he smirked in satisfaction. "You kneeling to me, the Saiyan prince," he taunted. "Perhaps there is balance in the universe after all. You think you've won? You haven't won anything." Freeza screamed, raising his head to make eye contact with the prince looming over him. "Oh, I don't think I've won, I know I've won. Here, let me prove it." Vegeta reached down, roughly hauled Freeza up, and then flung him high into the air. The tyrant somewhat regained his form in midair, wincing from his pain as he looked down towards Vegeta, but the prince was nowhere to be found. "Damn you and your games, Saiyan!" Freeza screamed, embarrassed and incensed that he was now being toyed with. "I won't be beaten, especially not by some monkey runt that I raised. Rest assured, this is no game," Vegeta's rough voice growled from behind him. Freeza spun around, only to find himself staring at a familiar gloved and bloody palm, inches from his face. The tyrant paled, his eyes widening. Vegeta's eyes narrowed. "See you in hell, Freeza." He then fired a violent and powerful golden ki blast, disintegrating every last cell of his enemy. The night sky lit up with the blast, briefly lighting the ground below for miles. Then the light was gone, and the dust settled. It was finally over. Vegeta landed lightly on the ground moments later, feeling like he could truly breathe for the first time in his life. It was like an unbearable weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He was free, and he laughed out loud like a madman from the exhilarating thought. He bent over as his hair slowly faded back to black, that invigorating power receding for the time being. The prince rested his hands on his knees, only now feeling the full impact from the tough shots he'd taken. The pain felt good though. It was a sign that it had really happened. The battle had finally come, and he'd won. "I did it," he whispered to himself, before laughing again. "You did it," Raditz proudly echoed, drawing Vegeta's attention. Gohan and Goku were standing not too far from him, looking more than pleased over the end result. The prince scanned the three over. The only survivors with Saiyan blood, they were all that remained of his people. For a brief moment, he wished Nappa was there to share in his victory, but he didn't like the guilt that filled his chest with that thought. He forced that all away as he glanced back over at his son's body. "Namek," he asked aloud, ready to leave as soon as possible to rid those lasting images of Trunks out of his mind. "We'll go once Bulma fixes us up some spaceships to make the trip," Goku answered, following the prince's gaze. "Don't worry though. Now that Frieza's gone, we don't have anything to worry about. There are space pods all over this planet from the forces Frieza brought." "That's true. Then it probably won't take very long." Vegeta grunted, looking down at the nasty, deep cut on the right side of his armor which was soaked in blood. "Damn cheap shot," he muttered, his fingers probing the bloodied wound to gauge how bad it was. "You want to go back to Bulma's so she can have someone take a look and make sure you're alright?" Raditz offered. Vegeta scowled, and then shook his head. The only thing he knew was that the euphoria and adrenaline of his victory were sweet, but he couldn't dwell on that for long. There was work to be done to ensure his son would be brought back to life soon. But first, he needed to rest and recharge. His ascension had been overwhelming, and his body wasn't used to such power. "Well, the sooner we can get to Namek, the better," Goku sighed, putting a hand on Gohan's shoulder while he looked over at the destruction of his planet. There was fire and screaming in the distance, but they would heal and recover with the Dragon Balls. He looked back at Vegeta and offered a small grin, much to the prince's shock. "Guess we're on the same side now, huh? Just like in Trunks' time?" Vegeta's eyes narrowed in warning. "I don't want to kill you until you become a worthy challenger, Kakarot. But if you tempt me, I might be convinced to change that stance." Unfazed by the threat and excited over the prospect of an epic battle in the future, Goku smiled. "I'm looking forward to that fight then." "Alright, let's get out of here already," Raditz cut in, before either of his fellow full-blooded Saiyans changed their minds and another battle commenced. He turned to go retrieve Trunks, hesitated a second, and then turned back to Vegeta. "Bulma gave me a spare capsule house that I've been using. She could probably give you one too. I could ask her if you want." The prince's lip twitched in disgust over how much his comrade had acclimated to Earth. He shook his head and then turned around, giving them all his back. Catching the hint, Raditz turned to Goku and motioned for them to leave. Goku shrugged and put a hand on his son's shoulder, leading the boy away. Raditz went over to Trunks and he raised him up with renewed respect. The brothers cast Vegeta a last glance, and then left to begin dealing with the next steps. Vegeta stood alone for about 20 minutes, in the center of the makeshift battlefield. The smell of death was thick in the air, but he didn't notice as he lost himself and thought over what he was going to do now. It was ridiculous. This was his time to rule and fulfill his destiny. It should have been an easy decision, and he didn't understand why he was having second thoughts now. It took a few minutes before he realized he was subconsciously staring at Trunks' sword, discarded and abandoned in the distance. Going over, he squatted down and picked up the weapon, examining it the exact same way Trunks had done before traveling back in time. How or when exactly Trunks went from being a no-name half-breed to a son he would shed tears for in front of others, Vegeta didn't know. All he knew was that he didn't regret the attachment, and wasn't ashamed of it either. His relationship with his son was a good thing, perhaps the only good thing he would ever have. Vegeta pulled off one ripped and bloodied white glove, turning it inside out. Standing up, the prince used the glove to clean the sword while glancing around. He could hear sirens in the distance coming closer. Deciding that it was his cue to leave, the prince took to the air to search for a haven to get some badly needed rest. It took a long time of flying before he got away from the death, panic, and destruction below him and found some untouched spots on the planet. He relished in the peace of the wilderness he descended into as he came down on a small landing on a mountain. It wasn't until he sat down against a rock wall that his exhaustion finally caught up to him. His eyes were already heavy as he weakly ripped off some blue, bloodied spandex below his knees to stuff into his armor over the wound that was bleeding the most. He tucked his gloves in there too, for good measure. In addition to that annoying injury, he had more than a few broken bones from battling Cooler, enduring Goku's Kamehameha attack, and then fighting Freeza. But none of it was life-threatening. He wiped the blood off his face with a shaking hand, and grabbed Trunks' sword again, leaning back to watch the view. Even though the prince fell into a deep sleep shortly afterwards, his right hand never loosened its grip on the handle of his son's sword. Bulma thought she had all the motivation in the world for ensuring a trip to Namek. But when Goku and Raditz brought back her son's lifeless body to her home, it turned out that she had been wrong. Her mind, so brilliant and logical, couldn't make any sense out of the grief that overwhelmed her. She barely even knew Trunks, and yet she cared for him as though she had raised him herself. Finally, she just stopped analyzing how she felt. It didn't matter. The solution was to work harder to get them to Namek as soon as possible. That was the only way to get her son back, not to mention her friends and her loving boyfriend. Would you be careful, you Saiyan lunkheads? You might break those if you drop them. Bulma angrily shrieked at Raditz and Goku several days later. The two Saiyans were each carrying a space pod that had crash-landed on the planet during the attempted purge, eager to have Bulma and her father start working on them right away. Raditz rolled his eyes, following his brother beyond the construction being done to repair Capsule Corp. These things are resilient. They're not going to break if they fall a few feet. Hey, when I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. Bulma yelled at him. Now put the pods over there so we can start looking at them. Raditz grumbled under his breath, but he and Goku did as she asked. The oldest brother then left while Goku and Bulma talked things over, stepping back outside. As he had been doing several times a day, he reached out his senses for Vegeta. As usual, he couldn't locate the prince, nor could he establish any type of mental connection. He would have been extremely concerned had Goku not told him that he had gotten a sense of Vegeta's key signature while searching for functional space pods the day before. It was low but steady, and so the warriors had concluded that he was likely resting. Not that it stopped Raditz from trying, though. The eldest Saiyan couldn't help the swelling of pride in his chest as he replayed the legendary transformation he had seen Vegeta achieve. It had been playing over and over again in his mind, and he didn't care. He was just grateful that he lived long enough in this timeline to see such a thing. Trying to sense Vegeta again? Goku chuckled from behind him. No. Just enjoying the view, Raditz sarcastically replied as his brother came to stand next to him. Do you think he'll come with us to Namek? I'm not sure what his plans are, Raditz admitted, looking off towards the distance again. Yeah, but you know how badly he wanted the Dragon Balls before. I'm not sure we can trust him, especially with his power now, Goku warned. If push came to shove, he could battle the prince now. It wouldn't be easy, but his power was also right on the cusp of the transformation. The challenge would likely push him to ascend, and with a level playing field, who knew what could happen? We can trust him. Vegeta only wanted the Dragon Balls to defeat Freeza. Now all he wants is his son revived. Yeah, Bulma does too. I got the coordinates for Namek from King Kai, and I've never seen her so motivated to get us there, Goku marveled. We'll be off to Namek in no time, I bet. Small wonder she caught Vegeta's attention, Raditz thought, shaking his head. We're bringing the boy with us, right? Goku looked confused. What boy? Gohan? Who else? Oh, well, I convinced Chi-Chi to let him come. I don't know if the Namekian dragon will be strong enough to wish back everyone who died, but if it isn't, then we'll just revive Piccolo. Then we can have the Dragon Balls on Earth again. Well, we'll soon find out. We need another space pod first though. The humans are already collecting and destroying most of them, so let's get one before they're all gone, Raditz ordered. He didn't even wait for his younger brother to respond before he took to the air, heading back towards the rural area miles and miles away where they had found the two untouched space pods. Hopefully there would be another functional one close by that the humans hadn't noticed yet. Goku's ki burst around him, and he was about to take off after his brother when he suddenly froze. The Saiyan cocked his head to one side, scratching the back of his head. He then glanced back towards the compound, blinking in surprise. He stood his ground for a moment longer, and then turned around, taking into the air after Raditz. As he flew, he couldn't help the small grin that broke out over his features. Meanwhile, Bulma was working like a madwoman. The space pods were new and advanced, so advanced that Goku had told her Raditz hadn't recognized the internal controls at all. In any other circumstances, she would have been impressed and drooling over the advanced alien technology. Instead, she was working diligently at rewiring the voice activation so the Saiyans would be able to use the pods. It was a simple but tedious affair, but with her father back in town and her engineers working hard, she figured she could have it done in a day. Finally, after about a half hour, she decided to take a short break. Her mind was working almost too fast, causing her to make simple errors, not to mention have a short fuse with her engineers. Leaving them and her father to handle the workload for a little while, Bulma contemplated going outside for a cigarette. But she got derailed along the way, going down below the medical wing and stopping outside of a door and peeking in through the glass to see Trunks. She had spent the last few days situating her son's body so that it would be in good condition when he was revived. Where these strong maternal instincts were coming from, she wasn't sure, but she wasn't fighting them away either. "Don't worry. We'll wish you back in no time. I promise," Bulma whispered, regarding him sadly through the glass. They had lost so many, not for the first time. She wondered what they would have done without the Dragon Balls. Minutes later, she reached down into the pocket of her lab coat, pulling out a packet of cigarettes while making her way back up to the main level. Just as she was going to step outside for a quick smoke, she heard a crashing sound down the hall of the medical wing. The heiress grumbled angrily under her breath. She could have sworn she had given everyone time off so no one could see Trunks. The last thing she needed was to dodge explaining the Dragon Balls. Marching down the hall and not even bothering to knock, she barged into a medical room, her words already spilling out. "Hey look, I appreciate the work ethic, but I need." Her words died when she saw the sight that welcomed her. Sitting on an examination table with his back towards her was Vegeta, and Bulma's first panic thought was that no one was there to protect her. Though she lacked all the details, she already knew the gist of how Freeza had been defeated, and it gave her no comfort to be in the same room with him, not with how strong he had become. Bulma slowly took a step backwards, hoping he wouldn't chase her if she ran. She had no hope of outrunning him, but there was a rifle with some loaded DNAD laying around somewhere. "I'm not here to kill you, female," Vegeta roughly said, not bothering to even look at her. His upper body was exposed, and he was staring down at his right side, both hands tending to an injury Bulma couldn't see. When he pulled one hand up though, Bulma saw a thin, bloody thread, and she realized that he was stitching himself up. She cringed a little when she saw the size of the needle he was using as he nastily added, "After all, I can't get off this damn rock without you, now can I?" Her fear subsided, and feeling braver, she asked, "You're going with the others to Namek?" The heiress waited for a response, but didn't get one. Vegeta ignored her, reaching over to a bin next to him and digging for a clean towel, throwing useless items aside to the floor. Bulma stood there, watching as he cleaned off the blood off the wound, staining the white towel in crimson. He then picked up the needle and resumed stitching the gash. She grimaced, not missing the way his hands moved expertly and the way he never flinched, like he'd done this to himself many times before. Slowly, Bulma's gaze drifted up his arms and settled on his bare back. The marks and deep scars he bore with no shame or regret stood out on his tan skin, permanent reminders of a past he would never be fully free from. She couldn't help but wonder how someone, much less a Saiyan, could receive punishment extreme enough to leave those types of scars. Unconsciously, she tugged on her lab coat, unable to tear her eyes away from the pain written on his back. For just a moment, Bulma almost forgot her personal feelings towards the prince as pity overwhelmed her. "And just what are you looking at?" Vegeta peevishly demanded, snapping the moment and bringing the heiress back to her senses. "Nothing," Bulma dismissively responded. She turned to leave, highly uncomfortable just being in the same room with him, but she stopped when he spoke again. "You have Trunks here?" "Yeah. He's here so his body can be taken care of, for when he's revived," she explained, looking off towards the wall cabinets in fake interest while he kept his eyes on his stitches. She kept her tone matter-of-fact, like he was nothing but an employee as she continued, "We'll wish for Piccolo back first." Suddenly, she had Vegeta's complete attention. Bulma looked back, and tried not to be afraid, but she couldn't help the tingle of fear in her spine over the way he was looking at her. The dark intensity in his eyes frightened her the most. The man was terror in the flesh. Not for the first time, she wondered how the hell Trunks had been conceived in the first place. "The first wish will be used to bring my son back to life, and for nothing else. And if I find out it's any different, I will take the boy with me to Namek and destroy this whole fucking planet." First of all, Trunks isn't just your son. Bulma snapped before she could stop herself. "He's my son too, you know, and I want him back as much as you do." Vegeta ripped the last thread off his stitches, before grasping the edges of the table he was sitting on, trying hard to keep his temper in check before he quite literally coated the room with her blood. The human woman was annoying, to say the least, and he didn't understand how the hell he put up with her long enough for Trunks to be conceived. There was nothing even remotely tolerable about the female besides her good looks, and if it wasn't for the fact that he was going to face his son again, she would already be dead in a pool of her own blood, while he stood over her and laughed. Bulma couldn't ignore the grinding sounds of the metal table twisting under Vegeta's fingers, a small taste of the enormous strength he possessed. Reminding herself of what Goku had told her, Bulma thoughtfully bit her lip for a second. "Look, wishing Piccolo back will bring the Dragon Balls back here on Earth," she sighed, being mindful of her tone so she wouldn't anger him further. "But if the dragon can do it, then we'll wish back everyone that died except for the evil monsters. Piccolo needs to be wished back either way. You know that's what Trunks would want us to do." "You knew Trunks for all of 2 fucking seconds," Vegeta sneered in contempt as he smoothly got off the table. He picked up his chest plate of armor, his back still to her. "Don't pretend to know what he would have wanted. The boy is dead. He will live again," Bulma swore with so much determination, it made him look over his shoulder at her. "You don't have to believe me, and to be quite honest, I don't give a shit if you don't. But I care about Trunks too, and I already lost him once since he won't be born in this timeline. I won't lose him again." Vegeta stared at her in silence, his eyes narrowed in scrutiny. Bulma bravely matched his gaze, refusing to be intimidated as she silently dared him to challenge the legitimacy of her words. Her hands were sweating though. Did he have to stare at her like that, with such a degree of savage intensity like he was going to kill her in the next few seconds? She tried her best to decipher what he was thinking, but she might as well have been trying to read a brick wall. After seconds that felt like an eternity, Vegeta looked away and Bulma let out a sigh of relief. The prince quickly tugged on his chest plate of armor, uncaring of the damage through the torso where Freeza had almost mortally wounded him. Then I suggest you go and get to work on those space pods if you know what's good for you, Vegeta threateningly added, slipping on his dirted white gloves. Bulma frowned, but wisely didn't push the matter further. After all, she did need to get back to work, and talking to Vegeta was like pulling teeth. She felt exhausted from the effort and they hadn't even conversed for long. She had no clue how Trunks could handle him for so long. The heiress opened the door to leave, and for some reason she didn't know, she chanced to look back at Vegeta. He was standing at the open window, staring out at the destruction in the distance. It took a moment before Bulma realized he had the tip of Trunks' sword on the floor, a few fingers on top of the handle swaying the sword. For better or worse, he did give a damn about his son, even if he didn't know how to express it or show it. She almost didn't believe it when Goku had told her so, but if she briefly looked past her hatred for him, she could see it. Vegeta, things between me and you dash Trunks' sword steadied. Vegeta's grip visibly tightened on the handle of it as he interrupted, there is no me and you, female. And there never will be, so get it out of your head right now. I already knew that. I can't forgive you for what you've done to me, for how much you've hurt me dash I don't see a dash I know. You don't care, I already know that. Would you just let me speak, she asked him in exasperation. Bulma was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts, and her tone was softer when she added, look. Despite all of that, despite everything I've seen you do and everything I haven't seen you do, I'm sorry you had to see Trunks die so violently in front of you. I know you care about him, and no father deserves that. Not even you. Silence for a second, until he responded in a terse voice, I neither asked for your pity, nor do I want it. You're lucky you're not dead already because of it. I'm not dash get out. Now. Bulma threw her hands up, turned around, and did as he asked, slamming the door on her way out for emphasis. She was frustrated and annoyed with herself for even trying to extend some kind of olive branch to him. He didn't deserve it anyways. She should have known better. Vegeta remained rooted to the spot at the window, seething over their brief interaction. But he had bigger things to worry about than the female, and with considerable effort, he forced himself to stop thinking about the young heiress. The Earthlings knew more about the Dragon Balls than he did. He had no doubt they would go to Namek and do as Bulma said. That meant he didn't have to go with them, which freed him to do, what, exactly? In the end, it came down to two choices. Leave Earth and take his place as Emperor of the Universe, restoring the legacy of the Saiyan race, or stay on Earth and destroy the androids who killed him in the future, ensuring that the terror of Trunks' timeline wasn't repeated. He couldn't do both, since it would take valuable time to prepare for the androids, time that he wouldn't have if he was preoccupied keeping the universe under his command. Do what his father would want, or do what his son would want. He sighed. Vegeta's eyes focused 10 minutes later when he sensed Goku and Raditz flying back, with Gohan trailing behind them. Goku was carrying a space pod in his arms as they all descended on the dying grass. Bulma was already outside to greet them, and they started to obey her command to take the space pod inside. Vegeta scowled over how passive they all were, and then leaned Trunks' sword up against the wall. He slowly climbed through the open window. Raditz, he barked, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Raditz turned and said something to his brother and Bulma, and then jogged back over to Vegeta while everyone else went inside. Vegeta. I've been trying to reach you, Raditz said, visibly pleased to see his prince again. I couldn't get through to you at all. I was starting to think maybe you left the planet, he joked with a smirk. HN. I just didn't want to be disturbed by you idiots, Vegeta gruffly replied, crossing his arms over his chest. Truth was, he had been sleeping to recover his strength again. It would take him some time before he could make the legendary transformation as effortlessly as Trunks could. He glanced back at the compound. Report. Bulma says she could probably have us out to Namek by tomorrow. She just has to break the code for the voice activation or something like that. These pods are new. Look more comfortable too. Who is going? Kakarot, his boy, and me. Bulma wants to come along, but Kakarot says it's best if she doesn't. She might get in the way. Vegeta scowled. How the hell would she get in the way? She's a genius, isn't she? You two idiots would probably need someone with technical skills around. Raditz cocked his head to one side, looking at Vegeta with a puzzled expression. He then raised an eyebrow, a mocking smirk spreading over his face. Are you defending the female, Vegeta? Becoming interested in her, are we? The prince's eyes widened to almost comical proportions, and it would have been hilarious to Raditz had that familiar fury not rushed over Vegeta's features immediately afterwards. Raditz never even saw him move, but a sharp pain dropped him to his knees, Vegeta's hand wrapping tighter than steel around his throat a heartbeat later. Don't insinuate that, again, Vegeta sneered, mercilessly tightening his grip with each word as Raditz clawed at his hand. That bitch means nothing to me, and Trunks will not be born in this timeline. I have already decided to be merciful with you, so don't fucking push your luck, Raditz. Raditz barely managed a nod, his face bright red, before Vegeta roughly released him. The prince crossed his arms, his features hard as he watched Raditz cough between desperate gasps of air. The Saiyan looked up at Vegeta warily. It wasn't the first time he'd received such a reaction from the prince, but it was the first time it had ever been over a female. It appeared that joking about a potential relationship between Bulma and the prince was going to join the list of topics never to bring up around Vegeta. Over the years, that list had turned into a lengthy one. Namek is on the outskirts of the southwest sector, Vegeta continued, as though nothing had happened while Raditz slowly stood up. It won't take you long to get there in these space pods, especially if they're new. It probably won't even take an Earth day. But how long until the Dragon Balls on Earth can be used again after they're restored? I'm not sure, Raditz hoarsely answered. Kakarot isn't sure either. We don't know if they will be active immediately or if we will have to wait for them to recharge. Worst case scenario, it could take up until a year. A year? Vegeta gasped in disbelief, before his eyes narrowed angrily as he yelled, it might take a whole fucking year to wish Trunks back? That's worst case scenario, Vegeta, Raditz explained, swallowing a little when he felt Vegeta's ki start to rise. He braced himself, but the prince turned around to give him his back, running one hand up through his hair in frustration. Maybe it'll be sooner. Plus, we might be able to wish everyone back with the wish anyways. Unbelievable, Vegeta grumbled, shaking his head. He hated counting on maybes. He had been doing that his whole life. Do you want to come with us? No. I'm sure you aren't incompetent enough to ruin a wish, though I'm not sure I can say the same about your imbecile little brother. He won't ruin it. We can get it done, Raditz assured, trying not to show his surprise over the fact that Vegeta was trusting him enough not to get personally involved. He subtly gave the prince a once-over, searching for any lingering injuries from the battle days ago, as though that would explain the change in his usual behavior. His eyes snapped back up in shock though when Vegeta casually asked, what do you think of this shithole of a planet, Raditz? What do you mean? Would you like to stay here and help these Earthlings battle against the androids? Raditz scowled, scratching the back of his head. Finally he shrugged. I suppose. Where else would I go? Not like there are many options. Well, I am considering reuniting the remnants of the galactic armies instead of destroying them, and taking over as the new emperor, Vegeta stated matter-of-factly. Raditz nodded, not entirely surprised. That had always been Vegeta's plan since the first day they were all brought under Frieza's service. The prince then turned back to face him, looking him right in the eye. If I were to go that route, you would become one of my top men. But it's your choice. As a Saiyan, I have no choice. You are the prince and the legendary. I'll do whatever you need me to do, Vegeta, Raditz said, bowing his head respectfully. You will serve me directly or you will remain here protect my son's home planet. Either way, you will do my bidding. I am merely giving you the choice of which way you would like to do so. Think about it, and let me know what your decision is when I return. When will that be? Before your trip to Namek. Let me know when that is, Vegeta ordered, tapping his temple twice with his index finger. I will, Raditz assured. Vegeta turned around to leave, his blue ki igniting around him, when Raditz called back out, Vegeta. The prince stopped and looked back over his shoulder expectantly, impatience in his dark eyes. What? Raditz stayed silent, and then spoke confidently. I don't have to think about it. I'm going to stay on Earth. Vegeta raised an eyebrow, silently questioning, and so Raditz added, I'm sure. Don't get too comfortable with your brother, Raditz. When he ascends, he will die by my hand. Regardless of the decision that I make, that won't change. We'll see what happens. Vegeta grunted, his eyes narrowing. Of course Raditz would side with his brother. He had already proven that much. Vegeta turned away as he ordered, let me know when the loud wench is done with her repairs. The prince's blue ki flared up, and then he was gone so fast Raditz couldn't tell which way he went. Vegeta was hardly aware of his speed, his mind racing. How easy it had been for the other Saiyan to make his decision. Maybe it should have been easy for him too, but it wasn't. He wasn't a third-class soldier. He was the last prince of his race, a Saiyan elite. It wasn't so simple to just turn his back on that, regardless of how fond he had become of his son. Suddenly, he remembered that he would have to go into space anyways, either to take over the remains of the Cold Empire, or to destroy it. And if he was going into space anyways, as if on cue, he spotted something white below, in the wet sand next to an enormous body of water. It was round and immediately recognizable, an unclaimed space pod. The water rushed up underneath the space pod, and the vehicle started to slowly roll into the water. It was starting to submerge when it came to a dead stop. Vegeta was behind it, submerged in water from the waist down as he effortlessly held the space pod in place with one hand. He frowned in thought, and then slowly rolled the pod back out onto the sand. His mind was made up before his boots reached dry sand. He was leaving the planet for good. The androids would be someone else's responsibility. And if the Earthlings managed to stop Goku from having his fatal heart virus, then Vegeta would come back and finish him off personally after the androids were gone. In the meantime, he had a destiny to reclaim. CH 21 of 23 next. Want more thrilling stories? Subscribe to Infinite Novel and dive into infinite adventures.